Chapter 241 The Bait. Fujin knocked and entered the Hokage's office. He noticed that Shikaku was also in the room. However, apart from them, no one else was in the room. Even the 4 Anbu ninjas that usually guarded Hiruzen weren't there. Hiruzen smiled and asked, "Fujin, how have you been?" He noticed the new braces Fujin was wearing and immediately noticed the high number of seals inscribed in them. He looked into Fujin's eyes and meaningfully said, "Good braces." Fujin ignored the gaze and the implications behind his words. He replied with a smile, "Thank you, Grandpa, I have been well." Hiruzen had gotten used to Fujin ignoring subtle messages. He said, "Your performance in the Anbu has been very good. Both Tsushui and the Anbu commander have recommended me for promoting you to the Anbu captain rank. However, the Anbu captain rank is equivalent to the Junin rank, so to become one, you have to complete a promotion mission." Fujin nodded and said, "Yes, Captain informed me." Hiruzen looked at Shikoku. Shikoku stepped forward and handed a scroll to Fujin and said, "Recently, we have been getting multiple strange reports from the Land of Wind. We suspect that Sunagakure wants to end the alliance with us, while the daimyo of the Land of Wind doesn't. Your mission will be to infiltrate into the Land of Wind and cause discontent for Sunagakure among their nobles and make them more inclined to assign missions to Konoha." The scroll has multiple scrolls with details of all the nobles in the Land of Wind, their nature, likes, dislikes, the people precious to them, and their current relations with us and Suna, along with some recommendations for you. You will act on your own and are free to do whatever you want to make progress in the mission. Just don't let anyone know that you are from Konoha. Fujin furrowed his eyebrows. The mission was huge. Though he had grown stronger, his strength wasn't at a level where he could casually influence the relations between a daimyo and a kage. Hiruzen and Shikaku noticed his expressions but didn't say anything. Fujin said, "The mission is too difficult. Though I could make some moves, I am sure that Suna will retaliate immediately, so my actions won't make much of a difference." Shikaku nodded and said, "Yes, but you don't need to worry. You aren't the only one we have sent. Many other Anbu ninjas have been given the same promotion mission, so the attention from Sunagakure will be divided among all of you. Of course, if you think that you can't continue the mission anymore, you are allowed to retreat. In addition, be careful of who you kill as the Anbu ninjas we deployed will be under disguises." A frown formed on Fujin's face. The mission was not only difficult but it also had several complexities. He sighed and thought, "Despite the training, most of my missions in the Anbu were straightforward assassination, elimination or protection missions. I guess that Hiruzen wanted me to focus on those skills. Looks like my guess was wrong. This mission will be a pain in the ass." Fujin asked, "How long do I have to stay there?" Shikaku replied, "As long as you can. Retreat when you think that your cover might be blown or you don't think you can make any further progress towards the mission. The success or failure of the mission will be decided by how long you manage to stay in the Land of Wind and the result of your actions there." Fujin digested the information. Shikaku asked, "Any more questions?" Fujin shook his head and said, "No, but I would like to have the attire of a Sand Anbu ninja along with a new mask that is popular among their ranks." Shikaku had expected such a request from Fujin. He handed Fujin another scroll and said, "This scroll has what you asked for. It also has enough ration bars and water to last half a year." Fujin accepted the scroll. At the same time, he got an idea of how long he was expected to stay undercover in the Land of Wind. Shikoku asked, "Are you ready to move out or do you need some time to prepare?" Fujin replied, "I can move out right away." Shikoku nodded and said, "Good. We have one more mission for you. This one isn't related to your promotion mission, but a good performance could influence our decision if your performance in the Land of Wind is subpar." Fujin looked at Shikoku without changing his expression and thought, "Do you still not know that such manipulation tactics don't work on me?" Shikoku obviously knew it. He had interacted several times with Fujin, but he was just too lazy to change his ways for just one person. From his point of view, regardless of how he spoke, Fujin would act the same way, so he didn't bother changing his dialogue. Shikaku said, "In recent times, we have noticed the movement of some bounty hunter rogue ninjas in the forests around our village. I speculate that they have an accomplice in the village who monitors the movements of ninjas and informs his group outside the village. We tried trapping them but haven't had any success so far as they are very careful with their targets." Hiruzen added, "You haven't been seen much since a bounty was put on your head, as your Anbu achievements haven't been credited to you yet, so you will be the perfect bait for them." Go through the village gate without any disguise and let them see you. Hopefully, they will think of you as the perfect target and ambush you outside the village. We will send a Junin squad to follow you stealthily from a distance. They will reinforce you as soon as the battle begins or you send a signal. Fujin thought for a few seconds and said, "All right. Do we have any intel on who the rogue bounty hunters are?" Kirizen shook his head. "We have eliminated one group who had rogue ninjas from Ela, but they didn't have any intel on others, according to our calculations." "There are 3 more groups," Fujin said. "Okay, I will move out now." He left the office and began walking casually towards the village gate while thinking, bounty hunters. I haven't encountered any in this world other than Kakuzua's. Anyways, as long as he or any other S-rank ninjas aren't involved, I should be fine. If they are weak, I can eliminate them myself. Otherwise, I will just have to stall them. Fujin reached the gate and felt a few eyes on himself. He analyzed. Though there are a bunch of eyes on me, it will be difficult to say who is with the bounty hunters. After all, there are always a bunch of eyes on the village gate. Oh well, let's see. As soon as Fujin left the village, 2 pairs of eyes sparkled in greed. One of these pairs belonged to a man in his 20s with an ordinary appearance and was operating a fireworks shop near the village gate. He observed the direction in which Fujin left and couldn't help but lick his lips. He thought, when we made a list of the good targets, this boy topped it. Who knows which gods he offended to get such a big bounty. Unfortunately, this coward didn't leave the village for so long. But finally, it's time. The man looked at a stall opposite his. The man in that stall also looked back at him. Their eyes met. Both quickly used their methods to inform their respective groups. However, unknown to both of them, one squad of Junins left the village secretly and followed Fujin from a few kilometers away. If either of the 2 bounty hunter groups knew about the existence of these ninjas, they wouldn't dare to approach Fujin, even if their courage was amplified 100 times. After all, this group was led by Konoha's newest elite Junin, copy ninja Kakashi. Fujin didn't sense Kakashi's squad. However, he wasn't surprised as he wouldn't be good bait if they could be sensed so easily. He continued traveling through the woods as if everything was normal, but he didn't move at his max speed to not create any doubts in the minds of the bounty hunters. 2 groups of bounty hunters quickly moved towards the route from Konoha to the Land of Rain. The first group was made of rogue ninjas from Kirigujka. They excelled in assassination. Their group contained 11 ninjas. Before betraying, 8 were Chunnings and Kiri, while the remaining 3 were Junins. The second group was made of rogue ninjas from the countries of Lands of Rain, River, Grass, Bird and Bear. This group had 24 people, 11 of whom were Junins in their village before they went rogue. Both reached the same spot on the route at the same time and got into a standoff. After all, their messengers had also informed them that another group of bounty hunters might also be hunting Fujin, and neither wanted the other group to get to Fujin first. Chapter 242. I don't wanna be a bait anymore. The 2 groups of bounty hunters stared at each other. Suddenly, Kido Shiro, one of the Kiri rogues, sighed in relief and said loudly, "Thankfully we found them. I was worried that these Morons might ambush him closer to Konoha and steal our jackpot." His statement irked the bounty hunters in the other group. One of them sneered and said, "Aren't you being too cocky? We outnumber you by more than 2 to 1. Do you think you have a chance to compete against us?" The leader of the Kiri rogues grinned. His name was Higashi Renzo. He was a large muscular guy with hideous scars all over his body. He was being trained to be the next generation of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. Unfortunately, before he could complete his training, everything went crazy in that country. Renzo said in a hoarse voice, "You may outnumber us, but do you weaklings think you have any chance against us?" A wave of killing intent washed over the other group of bounty hunters. Their expressions became very grim. Though they haven't ever experienced it, Kiri's cruel methods and the craziness of their ninjas were well known throughout the world. Ogawa Shingo, the leader of this group, exerted his chakra to snap his comrades out of the killing intent unleashed by his opponent. The Kiri ninjas were about to attack, but he raised his hand and said, "Stop. If we fight here, we will alert the Konoha ninjas and will be hunted until we are all dead. Even if you are strong against Konoha, you are nothing but bugs. Not only will you not get the bounty, but you will be hunted. So why not team up? We will ambush the kid together and split the reward on his head. We will each get 10 million ryo and won't have to fight each other to death." Shiro immediately said, "Why would we split the rewards with you? As for Konoha ninjas, we will have long killed you all and that brat and left even before those tree huggers sense something is wrong." He was interrupted by a Junin who said, "Shut up, Renzo. Let's cooperate. The Konoha ninjas are already hunting for us. A huge battle could invite all sorts of trouble. Renzo wanted to fight. However, he couldn't disregard the concerns of the Junin who just spoke. After all, he was the only seal master in their group and was his second in command. Without his help, bounty hunting would become much more risky. Renzo looked at Shingo and said, "All right, let's team up." The two groups teamed up and set up an ambush for Fujin. Fujin had a frown on his face. Even after traveling for 6 hours, no one intercepted or attacked him. He thought, did they sense the trap that Shikaku laid for them? Or were their accomplices on a break when I left the village? He continued moving through the vast forests of the Land of Fire while occasionally activating and spreading his chakra field. Finally, after half an hour, he sensed something off. His speed slowed down as he maintained his chakra field and analyzed. I can't sense 4 locations. These guys have a seal master within their ranks. That's annoying. I can't check how strong they are. But this might not be entirely bad. Since they are separated, I will hunt them one by one. The 4 locations that Fujin's chakra field couldn't sense were small underground rooms constructed using earth release. If it was a normal sensor, he wouldn't feel anything off. But Fujin himself was a seal master, so it couldn't be hidden from him. The 4 locations were all spread properly. 2 were close to the path that Fujin was taking, while the remaining 2 locations covered the left and the right sides. Fujin locked his eyes on the location to the left. He was about to move when he suddenly stopped. His eyes shrunk as his instincts warned him and he stayed in his location. He thought, why am I having such a bad feeling? It is almost comparable to the feeling I had when we fell into Darui's trap during his time in Ambu. Fujin had developed an incredible sense of danger. His instincts would warn him every time he was about to fall in grave danger. Though he wasn't completely sure, Fujin speculated that it was a result of him gaining more experience and due to him using his sensing abilities hundreds of thousands of times. The seals in those hidden locations were more advanced than what Fujin had speculated. When his chakra field covered those locations, a few seals began emitting green light. The leader in each of the rooms frowned. They knew that Fujin was a sensor, but didn't expect him to spread his chakra field deep in the forest. However, they didn't make a move as they knew that a sensor wouldn't be able to sense them. They expected Fujin to continue forward into their trap. However, their frowns deepened when Fujin didn't move forward and the seals kept emitting the green light. Renzo asked, "Did he discover us?" The seal master answered, "That is unlikely, unless he is a seal master himself or works closely with one." Renzo quickly analyzed the situation and said, "It doesn't matter, he is just one Chunin brat. Let's go out and hunt him." He quickly broke the seal on the underground room and appeared outside. At the same time, the other 3 hideouts also received the message, and soon they broke out as well. Fujin immediately sensed everyone and began sweating. He almost cursed. What the fuck? 35 fucking bounty hunters, and 7 of them have Junin levels of chakra. The bounty hunters ran towards Fujin at full speed. Fortunately, Fujin was over a mile away from their location. He quickly ran backwards and made a few shadow clones while thinking, "This is the last time I'm being the bait. The smartest man and the most experienced man my ass. If I didn't know them any better, I'd think that this is a scheme to kill me." 4 chakra fields extended towards Fujin and his clones and began sensing him. Fujin was left speechless once again. He cursed, "Seriously, what the hell? Seal masters, sensors, such huge numbers. Don't tell me a Kage is also hiding within their ranks." Fujin didn't know that 2 groups of bounty hunters were hunting him together. He'd have been confident of taking one group on by himself, but with the 2 groups working together, he didn't want to take much risk. Hiruzen and Shikaku also didn't predict that Fujin would lure 2 groups of bounty hunters. Otherwise, they would have sent more ninjas along with him. At the same time, Pakan said, "Kakashi, 35 new scents have suddenly appeared." Kakashi's eyes widened as he exclaimed, "35? Pakan replied, "Yes. Fujin is running back in our direction, but enemies are faster than him. They will reach him before us." Kakashi said, "Everyone, we will move at our fastest speed." Guy grinned and said loudly, 35 bounty hunters on your first mission as an elite Junin. I'd expect nothing less from my eternal rival." Despite talking, he was the only one in the squad who was able to keep up with Kakashi's speed. Kakashi didn't pay attention to Guy's words as he was confused. Didn't Shikaku say that Fujin was incredibly fast on his feet? How are they faster than him? Among the bounty hunters, one of the sensors informed, "His chakra has split into 4, according to the intel. He knows the shadow clone jutsu. I can't identify who is the real one." Renzo commanded, "Keep track of all 4 of them. If they split, we will also split and chase 1 each." Fujin's clones didn't split up. The bounty hunters moved incredibly fast and quickly caught up with Fujin. They still maintained the 4 groups. 2 were trying to chase Fujin from the right and left, while the remaining 2 were on his rear. The ones in the rear were led by Renzo and Shingo respectively. Fujin looked back at them and thought, "All right, they are close enough." Fujin and his clones split into pairs of 2 and dispersed in opposite directions. This forced the 2 groups in his rear to split up and move towards the groups on their respective sides. The situation suddenly changed as now the groups on Fujin's 2 sides became the closest to him, while the groups at his rear lagged behind. Fujin kept observing their positions. Soon, all 4 groups of bounty hunters and the 2 pairs of Fujin's clones were in a straight line. Fujin and his clones stopped and turned around. Fire release Searing Migraine Jutsu, Wind release Infinite Breakthrough Jutsu. One clone released the Searing Migraine Jutsu, while the one next to released the Infinite Breakthrough Jutsu. The same was replicated by the other pair. The jutsus combined together perfectly and fused into one deadly attack. The bounty hunters, who were chasing at their full speed, were suddenly stunned to see a massive firestorm head towards them. The attack came without any warning, and they had very little time to react. Chapter 243 The Source of Danger. On one side, the group closest to Fujin was a Kiri group of 5 led by their 3rd Junin. The former Kiri Junin rapidly weaved hand signs. Water release Water Wall Jutsu. A water wall appeared in front of his group of 5 just before the combination attack reached them. The jutsu hit the water wall and broke through it as if it was air. A huge amount of steam was released as the entire water wall evaporated. Renzo saw with wide eyes as 5 of his men were being engulfed by the firestorm. He could hear their screams. He quickly completed hand signs and shouted, "Quickly flood this place." Water release Exploding Water Shockwave. The other 5 in his group also used the same jutsu. A huge amount of water was released which formed giant waves and moved towards the incoming attack and their allies. On the other side, a couple of Junin slammed their hands on the ground. Earth release Earth Wall Jutsu. 2 walls appeared in front of them. However, the range of the combination attack was too much. It easily engulfed the walls and hit the group regardless. Unlike the battle-hardened Kiri rogues, this group didn't have the same expertise. For the first time in their lives, they began experiencing the unique feeling of being cooked alive. A few quickly escaped into the ground while the others screamed miserably within the firestorm. The group behind them saw the terror in front of them. Shingo quickly slammed his hands on the ground. Earth release Earth Dome. Seeing the mistake made by the group in front of him, he chose a jutsu that would protect them from all sides. The Fire-Wind combination jutsu engulfed the dome, but the people inside were safe. Water and fire clashed on the other side of the battlefield. The combined efforts of 6 ninjas overpowered the combination jutsu, and water waves engulfed their allies. The water doused the fire on them and provided them with some relief. 4 Kiri rogues were burned badly. Only the Junin was in better shape, as he had a thin layer of water armor surrounding him. A look of relief appeared on the faces of the 6 ninjas, when suddenly they began feeling the heat. They looked behind themselves and saw in horror as another jutsu of the same scale approached them. Since the second bandit group didn't stop the attack and just protected themselves, the Kiri rogue ninjas had to face an attack from both sides. This situation was a result of Fujin's clever manipulation of the battlefield, since he split into 2 groups. The bounty hunters assumed that he wanted to run away. They didn't even notice that they were all in a straight line. All their attention was entirely on the pair in front of them. Renzo once again weaved hand signs. In the nick of time, he completed his jutsu and spat out massive amounts of water. His jutsu was overwhelmed, but the water brought them enough time for others to repeat that jutsu. A water pool was formed which engulfed the 11 Kiri rogue ninjas and kept them protected from the fire. However, the water itself was heating up and evaporating at a rapid speed. Everyone could feel the heat, especially the 4 people from the first group who were very badly burnt. Renzo looked at the firestorm with a frown on his face. He cursed. Horrible, the intel was way off. It didn't mention large-scale wind jutsus. It didn't even say that he knew any fire jutsus. All it said was to be careful of his vacuum jutsus and swordplay. Suddenly, his eyes widened as he realized, vacuum jutsus, fuck. Despite being underwater, he shouted, "Be careful." It was a no-brainer that Fujin's ability with the fire release was completely a surprise to them. After all, he had developed it entirely during his time with the Ambu. While he didn't intend to keep it a secret like his lightning release, he hadn't been on any mission without his mask, so very few were aware of it. Fujin's details in the bingo book were almost 2 years old. Since he was never seen leaving the village after getting the bounty hunters assumed that he had given up on his ninja career. Fujin's clones observed the bounty hunters. In the group that used earth walls, 3 had escaped underground while the remaining 6 were burning. Behind them, 15 people were hiding in an earth dome. A smirk formed on both their faces. A dozen vacuum bullets formed in both their mouths. They launched them all simultaneously. The group of 15 bounty hunters were feeling safe inside the dome suddenly. Bullets rained into the dome. They were all caught off guard and couldn't even move. 12 ninjas had their hearts, brains or throats pierced. They collapsed on the spot. The remaining 3 were also injured but could still move around. They quickly escaped underground in terror and moved towards the Kiri group. On the other side, Fujin's clones observed the Kiri ninjas being protected by water and guessed, this group looks to be exclusively from Kiri, whereas that squad is only using Earth release. Does this bounty hunter group have factions within them? Oh well. They'll all be dead anyways. Wind release vacuum serial wave jutsu shot vacuum blades were launched at the water pool protecting them. The vacuum blades moved through the fire and into the water right when Renzo shouted. The 4 ninjas that were badly burnt didn't even see the attack coming and were cut into 2. The Junin who was injured tried to dodge as well. He barely moved his body and head out of the way, but one vacuum blade hit below his right knee and cut his leg off. The remaining 6 managed to dodge the attack. Renzo's heart ached. 4 Chunins were dead while 1 Junin would no longer be able to fight. That was a huge loss for his group. He felt a great hatred for Fujin and the messenger. At the same time, he felt regret for choosing Fujin as the target. However, his expression soon became vicious. He decided, since you have caused us so much loss, I will claim your bounty no matter what. I cannot disappoint Lord Mizukage any further. The effects of the fire-wind combination jutsu had finally begun dissipating. Renzo looked at his subordinates that were still fine. They noticed his gaze and nodded. Soon 6 bounty hunters from the other group came out of the ground next to the Kiri survivors. They looked at the situation around them in shock. Of the 35 attackers, only 6 were still uninjured. As many as 23 had died or were critically injured, and it had barely been over a couple of minutes since they began chasing after Fujin. Swords appeared in the hands of Fujin and his clones. They flickered towards the bounty hunters. The combination of searing migraine and infinite breakthrough jutsus was one of his strongest methods. Since this group managed to survive, using the same jutsu once again on them wouldn't be very effective. After all, he no longer had the element of surprise. Renzo noticed his movements and said, "They are coming. Prepare yourself." Everyone readied themselves. Fujin's attacks had eliminated most of the weaker ones from their ranks. Of the remaining people, half had Junin ranks before going rogue. Fujin's clone appeared to one side of the group and swung his sword from 5 meters away. A sword wave was launched at them. The expression of the group became grim. Apart from Renzo, only one person was able to follow the movement of Fujin and his clones, just before the sword slash could hit them. A barrier appeared around them. The slash hit the barrier and caused it to shake, but it stood erect. Fujin's eyes landed on the Junin who created the barrier. He thought, so this guy is probably their seal master. Fujin wasn't bothered that his attack wasn't successful. The information he gained in exchange for merely swinging his sword was sufficient. However, before he could attack once more, Renzo left the barrier. He raised his sword and slashed it down on the clone who had just attacked the barrier. Fujin's clone easily blocked his sword, but couldn't cut through it, as Renzo also used chakra flow on his sword. At the same time, Shinjo and 2 Junins from his group exited the barrier and attacked the other 3 Fujins. Fujin was surprised. He defended while analyzing the barrier. It looks like this is a one-way barrier. It prevents entry but allows exit, a good way to keep attacking from a location. Suddenly 4 more bounty hunters exited the barrier. They were the 4 Chunnings, including Shiro, from Renzo's group. Fujin frowned. He didn't want to get ganged up on, so the 4 of them counterattacked. Renzo was able to hold his opponent back, but the other 3 were feeling overwhelmed. Fujin's clones barely managed to get away from them and were about to attack the 4 ninjas that exited the barrier when those ninjas avoided Fujin and ran in 4 different directions. Fujin was confused. He thought, the hell, are they quitting the group and escaping? Or do they plan to attack me in the back? He didn't want to risk getting pincered and wanted to attack them, but the Junins caught up and began fighting once again, since they blocked him. Fujin confirmed, they aren't running away. The 4 ninjas moved and stood surrounding Fujin and the rest. They made the snake hand seal and clapped their hands. Immediately, a violet barrier began appearing and surrounded Fujin and the other bounty hunters. The barriers formed 4 walls, a roof and another layer underground, cutting off all means of escape. Fujin was shocked. He muttered, 4 violet flames formation. No wonder I felt such an intense danger. Chapter 244. Fooling everyone. A grin spread on Renzo's face. He said, you are now trapped. I was planning to just kill you and get your head, but since you have killed 4 of my men, I will torture you until you beg for death. The morale of the remaining hunters in the barrier finally recovered. Fujin thought, just 4? Are there multiple groups here? No fear appeared on Fujin's face. He retorted, torture me. He looked towards his right and said, I left the village to bait and hunt you down. If you dissolve the formation and surrender, you might be able to keep your life. Otherwise, even if you manage to kill me, your only result will be death. The bounty hunters were shocked to hear that Fujin was the bait. Renzo and others followed Fujin's gaze. Their eyes widened as 4 Konoha ninjas appeared outside the barrier. Shingo muttered with a grim face. We were schemed against. It is Kakashi of the Sharingan. Their morale, which had just recovered, crashed down. Fujin's words were completely true. They would have a very difficult battle to just kill Fujin. Facing even stronger Konoha ninjas right after it would be a certain death. Meanwhile, Kakashi's group also had grim faces. Yamanaka-ken said, Fujin is trapped. Kakashi too had a grim face. He said, the barrier has a high demand for chakra, and all 4 ninjas need to keep supplying chakra continuously. We will target one spot and kill one of them. The battlefield entered a deadlock. The Konoha Junins couldn't interfere, and though the bounty hunters were safe for the moment, they were very fearful for their life. Fujin noticed the distraction and immediately took advantage. The clones gathered chakra. The 4 Junons facing them noticed it and reacted. However, a dozen vacuum bullets were already fired at each of them. Despite the low distance and the fast speed of the bullets, they still moved their body as much as they could. Renzo dodged 10 bullets and the remaining 2 he blocked with his sword. However, cracks spread through his sword due to the power behind the bullets. His expression became dark as he realized, if I hadn't used chakra flow on the swords, the bullets might have pierced straight through them. However, the other 3 weren't as strong as him. They could only move sufficiently for the bullets to miss their vital organs. A bullet grazed the right arm of Shingo. It left a cut so deep that even his bone was visible. The other 2 were hit by 2 to 3 vacuum bullets each. Unfortunately for those 2, they were once again standing right behind each other. So despite dodging, they were targeted by the vacuum bullets heading towards them from their back. One of them was very unlucky. A vacuum bullet hit his back and pierced straight through his heart. He dropped dead. The other one had a couple more holes created in his body, but luckily avoided any critical injuries. One of Fujin's clones laughed and taunted, this barrier is good. This way, none of you can run away. Ha ha ha. Not wanting to lose any more morale, Renzo immediately attacked the clone closest to him and shouted, everyone, attack him. Attack and kill all 4 of him. Only after he is dead we can plan on how to escape. The once outside the barrier, there was still another barrier created inside the 4 violet flames formation. It still had 5 people. One was the injured Junin from Renzo's group. Another was the Seal Master, while 3 were from the other group. Other than the injured Junin, the others exited the barrier and attacked Fujin's clones. The Seal Master said, his chakra has become very low, he won't be able to continue for much longer. Fujin's clones were all low on chakra. They had spent a lot of their chakra on the fire-wind combination jutsu, and after using vacuum jutsus repeatedly, they didn't have much chakra outside the barrier. The Konoha ninjas were getting worried. They were bombarding the barrier with ninjutsu at the spot where Shiro was. The barrier shook but still stood erect. However, the 4 ninjas, especially Shiro, were under a lot of pressure. Their chakra was being drained rapidly. Suddenly, Pakin noticed something and looked to his left. After observing properly, he said, Kakashi, focus on your smell in that direction. Kakashi was surprised by Pakin's request. He quickly gathered chakra in his nose and enhanced his sense of smell. Suddenly his expression became very peculiar. Guy noticed and asked, what did you smell? Kakashi shook his head and said, nothing, keep an eye on the barrier. We won't attack anymore as we might run out of chakra before the barrier breaks. If that happens, we will be in a tougher spot. Guy and the 2 special Junins from the Yamanaka clan realized that Kakashi was hiding something. They didn't question him and began paying attention to fighting inside the barrier. Without their attacks, the 4 ninjas maintaining the formation sighed in relief. They quickly consumed a soldier pill to recover their chakra rapidly. Yamanaka-ken said, Though maintaining the barrier needs a lot of chakra, they could rest until they have recovered if they keep using soldier pills. Should we call in reinforcements to prevent that? Kakashi shook his head and replied, no need, there are only 12 left and 2 are severely injured. Regardless of the pills, the 4 maintaining the barrier will be exhausted. We can take them out without much issue. Yamanaka Ken nodded. Inside the barrier, Fujin and his clones fought intensely for 5 minutes. However, the remaining ninjas were all very careful. Fujin took deep breaths while analyzing. They are too careful. In the last 5 minutes, I only managed to kill that guy with 5-6 holes in his body. Though I injured the rest to varying degrees, I haven't been able to injure them critically. He looked towards his other clones. At the same time, they too looked into his eyes and nodded. Suddenly, 3 clones flickered away and appeared next to Shiro. Renzo had a bad feeling. He and the rest ran towards them, but the 3 clones touched the barrier and at the next moment exploded. The force of the explosions was felt throughout the barrier. Shiro fell to his knees and began vomiting blood. While the remaining 3 also felt the impact, they began coughing blood. Renzo shouted in panic, hang on. The barrier must not fall. The 4 rogue ninjas gritted their teeth and forcefully maintained the formation. Kakashi and the rest didn't manage to enter inside. Renzo looked viciously at Fujin and said, that was stupid. Without clones, you're an easy target for us. He immediately ran towards Fujin, who was breathing roughly. Everyone could see that he was exhausted. Guy was getting restless, but Kakashi said, it's fine. Just watch. Renzo swung his sword at Fujin. Fujin deflected his blow with his sword and punched him with his left hand. Renzo punched back at his fist. However, Fujin opened his fist at the last moment and caught Renzo's fist. A grin broke on his face. Renzo suddenly had a bad feeling. Without a word, Fujin exploded. All the bounty hunters were stunned. The explosion created a dust cloud. In a second, a body was launched out of the dust cloud. He landed a few meters away. It was Renzo. His left arm was completely blown off. His chest, abdomen, face and thighs had hideous burns and were covered in blood. In addition to the existing horrible scars, his entire appearance looked similar to that of a terrifying demon. One of the bounty hunters muttered in disbelief. Did he explode his main body? Renzo replied with a hoarse voice. It was a shadow clone. A sense of disbelief and shock spread through the 4 ninjas maintaining the barrier, and the remaining 7 ninjas inside the barrier. Such huge casualties were inflicted upon them by merely shadow clones. Finally, one said, no wonder he has a 20 million bounty. No, even a 20 million bounty is low for him. Outside the barrier, everyone other than Kakashi and Pakin was shocked. Yamanaka Ken exclaimed, that was a shadow clone. Where is his real body? On cue. Fujin flickered behind him. They quickly turned around to see him. There wasn't a single scratch on his body. Guy and the others realized that Kakashi and Pakin had smelled his scent and hence stopped attacking the formation. Kakashi looked at him and memories regarding Fujin's graduation exam surfaced. Fujin had made quite an impact that day by asking for a chakra metal sword. Kakashi never imagined that the boy would become so strong in just a few years. He said, good work. Guy had no idea how Fujin managed to achieve this, but he didn't care. He raised his thumb and said with a grin, you're good, I can feel the power of youth flowing through you. The 2 Yamanaka ninjas also looked at Fujin with surprise in their eyes. The bounty hunters in the barrier noticed Fujin outside the barrier. They had already expected. However, the eyes of the seal master widened. He exclaimed in horror, his chakra, chapter 245. The formation breaks. Renzo ignored his missing arm and all his injuries and tried to analyze when Fujin switched with a clone. He realized, according to the intel, he moves very fast. That is why we set up the trap and prepared the formation in the first place. However, when he escaped, his speed didn't match the intel, but our minds were too occupied with claiming his bounty, and we didn't notice the anomaly. He probably switched himself with a clone even before we exited the hidden bases, while his clones moved slowly to catch us off guard with that combination jutsu. Renzo's analysis was very close to the truth. Fujin created a shadow clone with 20% of his chakra and escaped right after sensing that he was facing 35 enemies. He hid his chakra signature and sent and moved without making any sounds or leaving any trail, due to which the sensors among the bounty hunters never sensed his main body. Later on, when he saw the 4 violet flames formation, Fujin realized why he was feeling a sense of danger. After realizing that his backup was Kakashi, he stopped hiding his scent so that Kakashi could smell his scent and stop worrying, while it could expose a flaw to the bounty hunters. Fujin didn't care as the bounty hunters were already in deep trouble. Inside the barrier, everyone looked at the seal master, who was also a censor, as he exclaimed loudly, "His chakra." Renzo looked at him and asked, "What about his chakra?" The seal master gulped and said, "It's massive. It's almost twice your maximum chakra, Renzo." He likely only used around 20 to 25% of his chakra on those 4 shadow clones. The eyes of the ninjas inside the barrier widened in horror as they took a look at Fujin once again, though Fujin had improved a lot during his time in the Ambu. His biggest improvement was the increase in his chakra reserves. As Ryu had speculated, the growth in Fujin's chakra reserves had begun slowing down. But thanks to the fact that his chakra reserves were already comparable to a Junin and the aid provided by the elemental crystals, his growth was still massive. His chakra reserves had grown by 3 times in the last 20 months. In another 6 months, his chakra reserves would reach the same level as Renjuro's. However, Fujin did sense that his growth was slowing down rapidly, so he wasn't sure about reaching Hiruzen's level of chakra at his current rate. Kakashi looked at the spot where Fujin's 3 clones had exploded and said, "Focus your jutsus on that ninja again." The Konoha ninjas were about to attack when Fujin said, "Wait, I'll give them a few more explosions." He created 6 shadow clones, each with 5% of his chakra. 3 flickered close to Shiro, while the other 3 flickered close to the other 3 ninjas maintaining the formation. Kakashi nodded and weaved a few hand signs as well. Lightning release shadow clone jutsu. A shadow clone infused with lightning appeared and followed Fujin's clones. Fujin's clones once again touched the barrier and exploded. Shiro was prepared this time and poured more chakra into the barrier. However, the explosions were much stronger as the clones were full of chakra. The impact of the explosion was once again sent through the barrier. As the person closest to the explosion, once again the majority of the impact was borne by Shiro. He collapsed on the ground and almost lost consciousness. However, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to stay awake. He said to himself, "No, I have to stay awake. Otherwise all of us will be dead." Through sheer will, he forced himself to stay awake. Unfortunately, Kakashi's lightning shadow clone appeared and transformed into lightning and hit the barrier on one single point. The barrier could no longer hold on, and a small hole appeared in it as the lightning broke through. It hit Shiro and electrocuted him. Shiro was already on his last legs. He didn't even have the energy to scream as his body was electrocuted to death. With his death, the entire formation collapsed. Immediately, all 5 Konoha ninjas flickered towards the opponents. The bounty hunters were on guard as well. As soon as the formation collapsed, they began running away in different directions. However, compared to the fresh Konoha ninjas, the bounty hunters were extremely tired. Fujin's clones immediately attacked the other 3 ninjas who were maintaining the formation. They were already exhausted and low on chakra. None among them could put up a fight and were beheaded with ease. Fujin's clones immediately flickered towards the ones who were escaping. Kakashi flickered behind Renzo. Despite being gravely injured, Renzo stopped running and swung his sword at Kakashi. However, lightning appeared in Kakashi's hand and hit the blade. Despite the chakra around Renzo's sword, lightning still conducted through his sword and into his body. Kakashi said, "Higashi Renzo, you're a long way from home." Renzo's sword shattered, and Kakashi's hand pierced into his chest. At the same time, Guy appeared behind Shingo. Shingo began weaving hand signs. However, Guy grinned, too slow. Before Shingo could complete his hand signs, Guy had already reached his position. His eyes widened as he saw a kick coming at him from the top. He immediately moved to his right. Guy's kick landed on the ground. Shingo was still maintaining his hand seal. However, Guy's kick tore the ground open. Hundreds of small stones were launched in all directions. Shingo was hit by dozens of small stones at rapid speed. He was still unharmed. However, he couldn't continue weaving hand signs. Guy quickly attacked him once again. Shingo snorted internally. "Do you think that only you can use taijutsu?" Shingo's physique was much larger and more muscular than Guy's. He formed his fist and punched back at Guy. Their fists collided. Shingo's expression immediately changed. An intense pain coursed through his entire arm. He cursed. What the fuck is his body made of? Unfortunately, he didn't have any time to actually ask that question. Guy's second punch was coming straight at him. Unwillingly, he had to punch back with his other arm, and intense pain coursed through that arm as well. However, it was much worse due to the injury caused by Fujin earlier. He cursed, "Fuck, it feels like my arm will break into 2. The guy immediately noticed that his opponent was in a lot of pain. He didn't miss the opportunity and bombarded Shingo with punches and kicks. Shingo, who dared to match Guy in taijutsu despite his injuries, was overwhelmed. He was beaten to a bloody pulp. Guy knocked him unconscious and tied him up while thinking. A Lord Hokage wanted some prisoners to check their memories. This guy looked quite strong. He should have some information. Some distance away from where Guy and Shingo were fighting, Fujin flickered behind one of the 3 remaining subordinates of Shingo. The bounty hunter noticed Fujin and turned around to fight. However, he was already very exhausted. There were dozens of small cuts on his body from the earlier fights. He had seen Fujin's clones cut through kunais with ease, so he began weaving hand signs. However, Fujin opened his mouth and shot 8 vacuum bullets. 1 bullet was aimed at his forehead, and another was aimed at his heart. The remaining 6 were to cut off his escape route. The bounty hunter moved his head out of the way and tried to twist his body. However, the vacuum bullets were too fast. One grazed past his face and tore his right cheek and ear off. His bloody teeth could be seen. Another bullet hit his ribcage and pierced through his chest. It avoided his heart, but he was on his last legs. With a swing of Fujin's sword, he was beheaded. Fujin spread his chakra field to observe the other battles. He noticed. So Kakashi has already killed their leader. My clones and that guy have killed their opponents as well. Guy should win soon too. So just that Seal Master and the one-legged bounty hunter are alive. Fujin sensed that Kakashi was moving towards the one-legged guy. So he moved towards the Seal Master. Fujin's clones followed him as well. Yamanaka Ken had confronted the Seal Master. Both entered in a fight and were evenly matched. The only bounty hunter who wasn't attacked so far was the one-legged Junin from Kiri, despite having just 1 leg. He was moving quite fast through the forest. Unfortunately, Kakashi killed Renzo too quickly. He immediately gave chase and caught up. The Junin noticed Kakashi and immediately turned around and weaved hand signs. Kakashi noticed his hand signs and weaved hand signs as well. Water release water clone jutsu, fire release fireball jutsu. 4 water clones appeared next to the Kiri rogue. They saw a giant fireball headed straight at them. One of the clones weaved hand signs. Water release water wall jutsu. A water wall appeared in front of them. The fireball hit it and exploded. A lot of water was turned into smoke and covered the area, while the rest was splashed back at the ninja and his clones. They were about to attack once again when a sound of lightning was heard. Lightning traveled through the water that was splashed on them and electrocuted them all. All 4 water clones were instantly dispelled. The one-legged Junin's eyes widened. He realized, he used my own jutsu against me. He barely maintained his consciousness. However, Kakashi appeared in front of him and placed his right hand on his chest. Immediately, an intense current passed through his body and knocked him out. Kakashi tied him up and placed a seal on his chest and thought, 1 captured alive. Guy should have captured his opponent as well. This mission is successful. A chapter 246 8 gate lock up. Water release water needles jutsu. Water split into hundreds of drops. Each drop turned into a needle and rained at Yamanaka Ken. Ken immediately flickered out of the way while making his hand seal. He flickered once again to get close to his opponent. Mind destruction jutsu. His opponent immediately moved out of the way and jumped on a branch behind him. Suddenly, his eyes widened. A vacuum bullet hit his chest and pierced straight through it. However, his body turned into water and collapsed a few meters behind him. His body appeared once again. He looked at Fujin and said, "You can hide your chakra. No wonder I didn't sense you back then. But now that I know it, hiding it is useless." Fujin didn't reply, but Ken flickered close to him once again and tried using the same jutsu. The Seal Master took out a scroll and jumped back on the ground to dodge Ken's attack. He opened the scroll and smeared his blood across it and weaved a few hand signs rapidly. Fujin frowned and wondered, is he attempting to reverse summon himself somehow? A chakra gathered in his mouth as he shot a few vacuum bullets at him. At the same time, Ken once again used the mind destruction jutsu. However, a black tortoise projection made entirely of chakra appeared between Fujin and the Seal Master. Fujin's vacuum bullets hit the shell of the tortoise and were stopped. At the same time, an azure dragon projection appeared between Ken and him. The jutsu hit the dragon but had no impact on him. Fujin frowned as he analyzed. A barrier. At the same time, projections of a vermilion bird and a white tiger were also formed around him. After tanking the jutsus, the projections collapsed and transformed into a barrier around him. The walls of the barrier had the image of those 4 mythical beasts. A smile formed on his face. Fujin gathered a large amount of chakra while changing his location. Wind release vacuum cannon jutsu. Fujin shot the powerful vacuum cannon at the wall, which had the vermilion bird image. The entire barrier shook. but not a single crack appeared on it. The ninja inside the barrier also looked completely fine. He taunted. "This is my strongest barrier. You can keep attacking for days. It won't fall. Your mind control jutsus will also not work against my barrier." Fujin was surprised. He analyzed. This barrier is smaller, but it is even more sturdy than the 4 violet flames formation. Worse, it doesn't look like it is using his chakra. I won't be able to crack it using shadow clone explosions. Fujin immediately snorted. "You are deep within the land of fire. Let me see how long you will keep hiding here." He dispelled his clones and got some chakra back. He sat at some distance from the barrier, in case the barrier had any more peculiar means. His eyes began glowing as he started observing the barrier properly. Ken also replicated Fujin's actions and stood in the opposite direction. After some time, the other Yamanaka ninja arrived. He went to Ken to ask him for an update. A few seconds later, Guy and Kakashi arrived. Both were carrying the ones they captured. Guy looked at the barrier and said, "I haven't seen such a barrier yet. What is it?" Kakashi observed the barrier and replied, "Barrier Defense Seal Jutsu 8-Gate Lockup. It's a wide-range barrier jutsu created by the Usamoki clan to create a barrier around an entire village. Looks like he has a modified version of it to protect just himself." The Seal Master's expression became grim after seeing the 3 Konoha ninjas arrive. It implied that every other bounty hunter was killed. He replied, as expected of the copy ninja Kakashi, "Since you know about the barrier, you know that you wouldn't be able to break it like the 4 violet flames formation." Kakashi replied, "Every barrier could be broken. Regardless, this is the land of fire. I could summon hundreds of ninjas and keep a watch on you until you can't maintain the barrier anymore." The Seal Master laughed and said, "Hundreds of ninjas just for me? Ha ha ha, I never expected my life to be so precious for you to waste so much manpower on me." Kakashi said, "It isn't. You won't be able to imagine the torture you'd be put under for wasting our time. So I'll give you an offer. Surrender now and I will ensure that no harm will come to you. Lord Hokage might even allow you to turn a new page in your life." The Seal Master was surprised. He thought, "I never imagined that Konoha would offer to recruit me." The offer was alluring. However, his eyes laid on the 2 Yamanakas and he rejected that idea. "No, these 2 will read my memories. Once they do, they won't allow me to live." He opened another scroll and said, "It's a tempting offer. Unfortunately, I can't do it." He made a confrontation hand seal. Immediately, dozens of explosion tags appeared from the scroll. A few stuck to his body while the rest stuck on the 4 symbols on the barrier. The Konoha ninjas immediately became alert. In the next moment, all the explosion tags exploded. Fujin immediately flickered away. Kakashi slammed his hands on the ground. Hearth release Earth Dome Jutsu. A dome appeared from the ground and covered him and Guy. At the same time, the last ninja grabbed Yamanaka Ken and escaped underground. The barrier collapsed. The chakra of the Seal Master and within the barrier fueled the explosion and caused a fire to spread in all 4 directions. It also caused cracks to spread within the ground around the barrier. Kakashi noticed that the ground under his feet as well as the dome had begun cracking. His expression became grim as he poured chakra into the ground to strengthen it. The 2 Yamanakas who were escaping underground had it rough. As the ground cracked, some heat entered the ground. After flickering a few times, Fujin turned around to see. The fire had spread for almost 300 meters from the explosion spot. He was surprised. What a crazy bastard. That barrier was a trap. He didn't intend to protect himself. He just wanted to use its chakra to amplify the explosions from those tags. He even used all his own chakra to amplify the explosions. Soon, the explosion died down, and only the fire remained. A few water dragons appeared in between the fire and moved through the fire and began dousing it. The water also entered into the cracks in the ground. The 2 Yamanakas sensed it and left the underground. Fujin sensed that they were all fine. So he flickered back towards where Kakashi was. He first looked at the spot of the explosion. There was no sign of any dead body. The Seal Master's body was completely obliterated. Fujin looked at the 2 Yamanakas and asked, "Are you 2 all right?" Both of them had several burns on their skin. Ken nodded and said, "It's fine. It's just minor burns." He looked at Kakashi and asked, "Why did that bastard commit suicide? Wouldn't accepting your offer be much better for him?" Kakashi replied, "More than suicide, it looked like he wanted to burn all the dead bodies. This way, we won't be able to gain any intel from them. Of course, if he managed to kill any of us, that would have been a bonus for him." Ken looked around and frowned. "All the dead bodies will have been burnt by the fire. We won't be able to read their memories now. It looks like he wanted to hide something crucial." He looked at the two ninjas that Kakashi and Guy had captured and added information that these two wouldn't have. Kakashi nodded and said, yes, I guess he didn't know about this. He took out a scroll and opened it. He made a hand seal and Renzo's body popped out. He said, I had stored his body as he was likely their leader. Read his memories. Yamanaka Ken nodded and immediately got to work. He placed his palm on the forehead of the dead body and inserted his chakra into his head to inspect his memories. Fujin's eyes were glued to him. The Yamanaka clan's ability to read memories of dead bodies was something he had wanted for some time. Unfortunately, he didn't get to visit the TI department frequently. During his time in the Ambu, he had only seen it being done thrice. Fujin analyzed. Just like before, the chakra that invades the brain of the dead body is pure yin chakra. It is almost entirely the opposite of medical ninjutsu. But how exactly does this work? Despite observing it for the fourth time, he didn't have any idea about the internal workings of the jutsu. Though he had killed hundreds of people, his ambush squad would always be close by. He never got to experiment on the dead bodies. And he had no intention of experimenting on the only dead body still in his possession. Chapter 247 My shamelessness is not enough. Ken continued reading his memories for a few minutes. Sweat appeared on Ken's body. It was apparent that reading memories from a dead body was very taxing on him. Finally, he let him go. His expression was grim. Kakashi asked, did you get any information from him? Ken nodded and said, I couldn't read all his memories, but the ones that I could show that this bounty hunting was a scheme made by Kirigujka. Kakashi furrowed his eyebrows. Ken continued, he hadn't gone rogue. Instead, he was given a mission by an elder from the Mizukage faction from Kirigujka. They currently have a huge advantage against the rebels who are hiding. Since they are hiding, the forces of Mizukage are ideal. But the rebellion means that no one will issue missions there, so to raise funds they issued him a mission. He was to go rogue, get in touch with other rogue Kiri ninjas, and form a bounty hunter group. After collecting the bounties, they would secretly send the majority of the bounty to Kirigujka. That Sealmaster was assigned as his deputy for this mission. Apart from them, all others were actual rogue nins who got used. Ken's words left the four Konoha ninjas speechless. Even after going rogue, those guys were still being made to work for Kirigujka unknowingly. Fujin couldn't help but think, what a scheme, and what shamelessness. Say, every time I think that I am getting too shameless, this world gives me a reality check. These bastards are 100 times more shameless than me. I need to improve myself. Back in Konoha. A chill passed through the spine of Hiruzen. He immediately got alert and observed his surroundings. He didn't notice anything weird, and wondered, why did it suddenly feel like someone wanted to take everything from me? Are any of my former students or teammates scheming something? It has been a while since I have paid attention to their movements. Back in the vast forests in the Land of Fire, Kakashi said, it is a great scheme. The high number of ninjas going rogue should weaken them, but now they have managed to make use of them instead. I guess that they have also sent guys like him to other villages. He looked at the other Yamanaka ninja and said, you inspect his memories as well. The ninja nodded and got to work. Kakashi looked at Fujin and said, according to our intel, the bounty hunters group shouldn't have been so big. I guess two different groups allied together. We should be able to confirm it after checking their memories. Fujin nodded. He had the same analysis after Renzo threatened him. Kakashi continued, this mission is done. Will you be coming back with us? Fujin shook his head and answered, no, I have another mission. I will take my leave. Kakashi nodded. Fujin flickered away. Guy looked at him and said, he is quite strong, Kakashi. There weren't even half the bounty hunters alive by the time we reached. Kakashi nodded. He said, Lord Third is very positive about his prospects. I guess his progress shouldn't be very surprising. Anyways, let's clean up the battlefield. Kakashi and Guy gathered the remains of every burnt dead body. Most of the dead bodies were badly burnt. The only ones who were in decent shape were the ones who had attempted to hide under the Earth Dome and were killed by Fujin's vacuum bullets. After storing all the bodies, the two Yamanakas used mind-body switch jutsu to take over the bodies of the two prisoners so that they wouldn't suddenly attack. The group returned back to Konoha. After returning, they reported the details of the mission to Hiruzen and Shikoku. After analyzing the data, Shikoku let out a sigh and said, despite being in such a mess, they still try to create a mess in other villages. Hiruzen said, it's because they know that no one would retaliate with force. After all, no one wants to enter into their mess. He looked at Kakashi and instructed, deliver the dead bodies to torture and interrogation department, have them inspect all their memories. Once we can't find any new memories, deliver their bodies to the underground market and claim their bounties. He looked at Shikaku and said, find a way to spread the news of the death of Higashi Renzo and Kiri. It will improve the morale of the rebels. Though I won't be involved directly, the Mizukage would have underestimated us way too much if he thinks that we can't retaliate at all. Also, form a few patrol squads to roam randomly through the country to find traces of any other rogue Kirigujka ninja. Shikoku and Kakashi nodded and left the office. A frown formed on Hiruzen's face as he analyzed. Kumo has already been trying to scheme a lot against us. Though Suna is allied with us, they are growing restless by the day. Ida is silent for now, but once that fence system makes up his mind, they will become extremely problematic. And now even Kiri is making moves. Sigh, these peaceful times might not last very long. In the middle of the desert, existed a city that commanded awe and reverence. Amidst the harsh desert environment, this majestic city stood proudly, surrounded by a colossal wall that stretched as far as the eye could see. The towering walls, crafted from sturdy sandstone, created an imposing barrier against the unforgiving desert winds. Samurais clad in desert-hued armor stood vigilant at the city gates. A group of traders approached the towering walls of this city and moved towards the samurais. The samurais noticed their arrival. Among them was Captain Hayashi Ryota, who was responsible for the safety of the city gates. One of the traders walked forward and bowed respectfully. The samurai scrutinized the group with a discerning gaze. The trader, dressed in fine desert attire, exuded an air of confidence and respectability. Ryota said, welcome to the Wind Capital, esteemed travelers. I am Captain Hayashi Ryota. State your purpose and present your trade permits for inspection. The trader said, I am Takahashi Hiroshi. I have heard about your valor, Captain Ryota. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Ryota's mood improved on being praised. Hiroshi handed him the required documents and said, we are a new traders group from the land of Bird. Ryota and the other guards inspected the documents carefully and verified their authenticity, satisfied with their findings. Captain Ryota returned the permits to Hiroshi and allowed them to enter the city. Ryota said in a diplomatic tone, as honored guests of our city, we trust that you will adhere to our laws and customs during your stay. Please be mindful of the city's regulations and treat our citizens and fellow traders with respect. Enjoy your time in the Wind Capital and may your business ventures be prosperous. Hiroshi bowed deeply once again and said, we are humbled by your hospitality, Captain Ryota. We shall uphold the highest standards of conduct and contribute positively to the commerce of this remarkable city. Hiroshi and his fellow traders entered the city along with their caravan. As soon as they did, they were immediately captivated by the stunning contrasts and breathtaking sights in the city. The streets wound through the city like intricate mazes and provided shelter from the scorching sun. Buildings of varying heights and styles rose proudly, their architecture inspired by the desert environment. Majestic minarets and ornate domes punctuated the skyline as their golden surfaces glimmered under the brilliant sun. Hiroshi couldn't help but mutter in awe. So beautiful, Ryota smirked and said, everyone who enters the city for the first time feels the same. Hiroshi nodded and replied, it's difficult to feel anything else. Ryota nodded. Hiroshi said, I'd love to keep watching. Unfortunately, some of my goods are perishable. Could you tell me where the markets are situated, Captain Ryota? Ryota nodded and provided him with the information. Hiroshi and the other traders began moving according to his instructions. Soon they left the sight of those samurais. Immediately, every trader's expression changed. The awe and captivation disappeared from their faces. Hiroshi said in a neutral voice, sell all of our products. All the traders immediately got to work. Hiroshi kept observing the city. They had goods in bulk, so they found appropriate buyers and sold all their goods at low prices. In a few hours, their entire caravan was empty. Hiroshi took all the money and said aloud, since we made the dangerous journey successfully and have plenty of money, we should enjoy some time in this village. Of course, in our time here, we will also check which goods are the most appropriate and profitable to trade. So enjoy yourself for the next few months. The trader smiled and rejoiced on getting a long break. They split into groups and left in different directions under the envious gazes of some people. Though trading was very risky, if done successfully, it was very rewarding. Hiroshi left alone and booked a room in one of the most expensive hotels in the Wind Capital. He stood on the balcony and saw the sunset. A golden hue was cast across the city, making it seem even more breathtaking than ever. A smile formed on his face as he thought, In terms of the scenery, the Wind Capital is leagues ahead of the Fire Capital. Chapter 248 The Never-Ending War. As the sun set, a bunch of memories started popping up in his mind. He analysed all the memories and thought, good, all my clones have safely dispelled themselves. No one noticed them. Finally, it's time to begin my mission. 1 week ago, after eliminating the 2 groups of bounty hunters, Fujin split off from Kakashi's group and continued his journey forward. However, the fight had exhausted nearly half his chakra. So he decided to take a break in a nearby town. He entered the town after using the transformation jutsu and looked for an ordinary hotel. After renting a room, Fujin opened the scrolls Shikaku had handed him and began reading. The scrolls had a lot of details regarding the nobles in the Land of Wind. It contained a detailed list of all nobles, their families, friends, and their political standings. After a few hours, Fujin let out a sigh. He muttered in his mind, I used to think that the number of ninjas is quite high, but until I joined the Ambo, I never ever imagined that the number of nobles would be this high. Every major country has at least a couple of thousand people related to the daimyo. Do they spend all their time breeding? And Shikaku's reports have over 500 nobles who he wants to be targeted. Sigh, when we talk about wars, everyone only thinks about the 3 great wars that have happened. Meanwhile, everyone is worried about when the 4th Great Ninja War will happen. But in reality, the 5 major villages are at war with each other constantly with no breaks. It's just that these wars don't have a battlefield. Instead, they are fought by the special forces of each village. Instead of clashing openly, the war is about sabotaging others while increasing your own influence. In the last 12 months, I have basically been targeting nobles in the nearby smaller countries who are against Konoha. Like in the previous mission, we killed the forces of that noble from the Land of Waterfall who sided with Ayla. The end result of such clashes is to make these nobles favor your village and hate the enemy's villages. And in this competition, Konoha has a huge advantage. Other than the Land of Rain, every neighboring country favors Konoha more than its other neighbors. The superiority of Hiruzen and Shikaku's scheming abilities can be seen through this. Of course, there is another big reason. Konoha has no ambition to claim the lands of other countries, but other countries want Konoha's lands. However, the smaller countries act as a buffer between them. If some country successfully manages to capture territory within the Land of Fire, the smaller countries acting as a buffer will also have to be conquered by them, or at least some parts of the country would have to be annexed, and if Konoha couldn't resist them, there's no way any smaller country could resist them. Fujin let out a sigh and thought, when I first read Naruto, I was disgusted by the fact that Kumo tried to kidnap a little girl. If kidnapped, her fate would have been terrible. Just the thought of it was revolting. But now it doesn't seem very extreme. The chances of kidnapping someone from the Hyuga compounds should be close to 0. Perhaps the goal of that kidnapping attempt wasn't to kidnap Hinata but rather to have the kidnapper die in the Hyuga compounds, perhaps. Even if Heishi didn't kill the kidnapper, as long as he was caught, he'd have committed suicide and died in the Hyuga clan compounds. This way, they would be able to exchange the life of a normal ninja with a strong clan leader, even though Heishi preserved his life. Konoha and the Hyuga clan lost an elite Junin. In peacetime, that is a great loss. I guess they also wanted to sow discord between the village leadership and the Hyuga clan. After all, by then, the Uchiha clan were already made to live on the outskirts of Konoha. If the 2 strongest clans were unsatisfied with the Konoha leadership, the village would become quite unstable. Even if nothing bad happened, as long as the process of recovery is slowed down, Konoha would be in trouble when the next Great War starts. Fujin let out another sigh. The more I get involved, the more I realize how deep the schemes run in this world. And for some reason, I have a feeling that soon it will be my turn to play these schemes. If I can't, then I won't be able to achieve much in this life either. Fujin rested the night in that hotel before continuing his journey the next day. He crossed the border and entered the Land of Rivers under a random disguise. He found an unoccupied cave and entered it. He inscribed a few seals in the cave to provide some protection and to stop and misdirect any attempts of scouting that place. He quickly changed into the attire of Suna Anbo and thought, for the next few months, this will be my disguise while doing shady work. He left the cave and journeyed towards the Land of Wind. The border of the Land of Wind was as massive as that of the Land of Fire. However, unlike Konoha, they were suffering from a massive budget crunch. In addition, the desert conditions in the Land of Wind were many times rougher than the green forests in the Land of Fire, so very few patrolling teams used to patrol the borders. Fujin had no trouble infiltrating the Land of Wind. He continued moving rapidly across the vast deserts while thinking. Although the rough environment makes patrolling difficult, the vast open desert makes hiding very difficult. After traveling a few hundred kilometers into the desert, Fujin took a break and began making a plan. He analyzed, most of my targets are in the Wind Capital. I will have to begin from there, but how should I infiltrate it? Should I just sneak in? Fujin calculated his chances of sneaking in successfully. After some time, he rejected that idea. No, I have been to the fire capital a few times, though the security wasn't as good as Konoha. It was still very tight. Samurais patrolled the walls and the walls themselves had numerous seals carved in them. Though I could still infiltrate without alarming any seal, it will be incredibly difficult. So, I guess my only option is to enter through the city gates. Suddenly, Fujin changed his direction. Instead of traveling towards the Wind Capital, Fujin began traveling towards the north. After traveling for another day, Fujin stopped and opened a map. He concluded, this should be the route where trading caravans pass through while trading between the land of wind and the land of earth. I'll just wait until I can catch a ride. He carved a seal on the sand and made a hand seal. The seal began sinking into the sand. He repeated the same process at distances of 25 meters dozens of times. Finally, he weaved another hand sign and placed his hand on the ground. First release underground camp jutsu. He poured his chakra into the ground as the rocks and sand began moving. In a few minutes, one small underground room was formed. Fujin inscribed a seal on the wall of this room and thought, good, now if anyone passes through this route, the seals will detect the vibrations in the ground and cause this seal to light up. I will wait here for up to a week. If no one shows up, then I will try to actively find a group of travelers instead of just sitting here. Fujin carved some seals to ensure that the room can't be sensed. He entered it and rested while waiting patiently. In the next 2 days, the seal lit up thrice. Fujin exited the room to observe each time. Unfortunately, all 3 groups were ninja squads from Suna. Luckily, none of them was sensing when Fujin exited the room. So his location stayed hidden. Finally, on the 3rd day, the seal lit up once again. Fujin sighed and muttered, if it is another group of ninjas, I will kill and impersonate them instead of traders or merchants. He exited the room. Chakra gathered in his eyes as he began observing the chakra signature while staying under the sand. A smile appeared on his face as he thought. Finally, a group of 16 people. 12 have civilian levels of chakra while 4 have chunin levels of chakra. He made a hand seal and his figure disappeared from under the sand. Suddenly, one of the 4 ninjas turned and looked at where Fujin was. The ninja next to him asked, did you notice something, Captain? The captain replied, it felt like a breeze suddenly passed through that area. Leave it, I might be imagining it. They continued on their journey. After traveling for around 2 kilometers, one of the ninjas said, Captain, there is someone ahead. The ninjas got alert. The captain said loudly, be careful everyone. It might be another bandit group. However, the ninja shook his head and said, no, Captain. It is only one person and his chakra is very low, so he isn't a ninja. The group traveled forward carefully. After a couple of 100 meters, they saw the person. He was a man in terrible shape. His clothes were torn in multiple places and dyed in blood. He had multiple injuries on his body. He turned his head towards them and hope appeared in his eyes. Chapter 249 Test Subjects. The man immediately got up and walked towards the caravan. However, he was limping. The group noticed a deep cut just above his left knee. The man walked to them with tears running down his face and hurriedly begged, please help me. I am a trader just like you, but my caravan was attacked by desert bandits. All of us were captured. I luckily managed to escape, but they are still hunting for me. Please, Unc. However, before he could finish speaking, a kick landed on his chest and sent him flying backwards. A look of shock appeared on the face of the man. He looked at them in disbelief. The 4 ninjas were wearing headbands that didn't belong to any ninja village. The caravan had a flag of the land of bird country. The man still begged, please help us and save my friends. If not, at least take me with you. I don't want to die here. One of the ninjas looked at him and asked, what do we do with him, Captain? The captain shook his head and said, it's better to kill him. If he is planted by a bandit group, then we might get in trouble. Behind him, the leader of the traders, Hiroshi, said, just kill him and get moving. I don't want to delay my first trade. The injured man heard the words carefully. Fear showed on his face. One of the ninjas grinned and walked forward. You heard him. You can say goodbye to your pathetic life. He grabbed a kunai and walked towards the man. The man looked at him with terror in his eyes. He raised the kunai and was about to attack when his head was sent flying into the air. The traders and the ninjas, who were looking at the spectacle with ridicule in their eyes, were suddenly shocked. Before they could even react, the heads of the remaining 3 ninjas were also sent flying. Terror flooded into the minds of each of the 12 traders as they saw the injured man behead the ninjas they hired for their safety. The injured man said in a cold tone, "You'd have died either way, but your actions avoid any feeling of guilt that I might have felt." He suddenly disappeared. Hiroshi saw as every trader began falling down to the ground one by one. Only he was left standing. The injured man, who was now a Shinigami in his eyes, stood in front of him and looked into his eyes. He couldn't move as the man's hand squeezed his neck. Suddenly, the entire world became pitch black. He couldn't even see the arm that was holding his neck. He heard Fujin speaking, "If you want to live, tell me every detail about yourself and your trading caravan." Hiroshi was completely terrified. He screamed, "I will speak. Please don't kill me." Hiroshi immediately gave him all the details that he wanted. He also took all the documents from Hiroshi. An electric current passed through Hiroshi's body and knocked him out. Fujin walked towards one of the knocked-out traders and lifted him. A current passed through his body and woke him up. Fujin interrogated him to cross-check the information. He repeated the process with all 12 traders. After collecting all the data, Fujin analyzed. "If I was lucky, this is a perfect group for me to impersonate. It is their first mission, so they shouldn't have any contacts in the Wind Capital. Not to mention, they come from the land of Bird instead of the land of Earth, so their backing will be much weaker. In addition, the ninjas they hired don't work for any village. Instead, they work for the mercenary group Kiragan no Senson. Though this mercenary group is quite influential, it mostly operates in the countries between the lands of Wind and Earth. It shouldn't have much sway here. And even if they do, they will be much slower than a ninja village to investigate their missing ninjas." Fujin observed everyone around him and thought, it'd be a huge waste to just hide their bodies. He walked towards one of the detached heads and extended his right hand towards it while thinking, "It should work against detached heads too, though I am not sure if using them for my first try is a good thing." Yin chakra appeared on his palm and poured into the detached head. Fujin controlled the chakra to gently enter the brain. He closed his eyes to properly control the chakra. As chakra surged unhindered, a profound strain befell the brain. The delicate neural pathways, unaccustomed to such a surge, begin to falter and distort under immense pressure. Fujin frowned. He stopped pouring the chakra into his mind and wondered, how the fuck do the Yamanakas train? Despite my chakra control, the brain was destroyed so easily, and I didn't even see a single memory. Do the Yamanaka have secret methods of learning? Or do they test on test subjects before being allowed to use it on alive people? Fujin fell in a thought. As I expected, this is very complicated, though I know that it requires yin chakra. Just that isn't enough to learn this jutsu. If I am right, several generations of Yamanaka clan ninjas probably worked on this to create this secret technique, so I am basically trying to replicate a decades-long process without much information. Right now, I have only 2 pieces of knowledge. The first is that the chakra has to be pure yin, and the chakra control has to be very good. The second is that memories aren't stored in just one single part of the brain. They are distributed across multiple brain regions and involve intricate neural networks and connections rather than being confined to a single location. Unfortunately, I have no idea which those regions are. The library didn't have any information regarding this. I am sure my previous world had better information about this. Unfortunately, I hadn't studied biology for years. I simply don't have any memories regarding this. Fujin analyzed for a few minutes before sighing, "Leave it. I can't think of anything good. I will just experiment on them." Fujin experimented on the 3 detached heads. The first 2 had their brains destroyed. On the last one, his chakra control with the yin chakra became much better. He managed to continue invading his brain with yin chakra without turning it into mush. However, he didn't get any memories from it. Fujin wondered, do I need to make more modifications to my yin chakra or move it in a certain way to read memories? He couldn't say for sure. He looked toward the 12 unconscious traders and muttered, "I hope I have luck with living test subjects." He walked towards one trader, tied his limbs and woke him up. The trader woke up terrified. He shouted and begged, but Fujin didn't pay any attention to him. He placed a hand on his head and began inserting yin chakra into his head. He delicately controlled his chakra to enter his brain and access the neural networks in his cerebral cortex. However, the man suddenly yelled. Soon his expression changed. He spoke gibberish and he began making weird faces. Fujin looked at him with a solemn expression. He has become intellectually impaired. Another reason why I should never let anyone try to read my memories. If they wish to harm me, I won't even be able to resist. Fujin continued trying to read his memories until his brain was destroyed and he stopped moving and dropped dead. Fujin experimented on the remaining 11 traders, and all faced the same result. Fujin sighed and began storing everyone's dead bodies in scrolls. He stored the 4 dead ninjas in one scroll and the 12 dead traders in another. He placed the scroll of the dead ninjas in the underground room he had created and completely sealed it up. He analyzed. If the mercenary group had any means of tracking them, they would be led here. Even if they find the blood where I killed them, they will only find the blood of these 4 ninjas. Fujin walked back to the caravan and created shadow clones. They transformed into the 11 traders while Fujman transformed into Hiroshi. They buried the sand dyed in blood a few meters below the surface and began their journey to the Wind Capital. Mid-route, Fujin made another shadow clone who traveled a few kilometers and buried the scroll with the dead bodies of the traders deep within the sand. In these vast deserts, the chances of it being found were negligible. Chapter 250 Assassination. Fujin was enjoying his evening breakfast on his balcony while enjoying the beautiful sunset. He thought, this lifestyle is kinda good. I see why so many ninjas want to be recruited by a daimyo. Unlike the daily life of going through deadly missions and not knowing whether you'd live or not, the life here is just too relaxing and stress-free. Fujin had stayed in the Wind Capital for a couple of weeks. He spent it relaxing in his luxurious hotel room and sightseeing around the city. He analyzed, but there hadn't been any news about anyone looking for Hiroshi or the ninjas protecting them, so I should be able to maintain this identity for some time. He turned his eyes towards a few mansions in the city. They were quite far from his location but still visible. Though he couldn't see every detail, he knew that a few were moving sneakily into those mansions. Just like Fujin, one noble was enjoying his life in one of the mansions Fujin eyed. He was enjoying his luxurious life while thinking, I am so glad that the daimyo decided to favor Konoha instead of Suna. Otherwise there is no way I would be able to sign such a huge deal with the Kazekage. Once the deal is finalized, money will start rolling into this mansion, ha ha ha. At that moment, a maid entered the room. She was in her teens and looked very beautiful. The noble, who was in his 50s, lecherously eyed her. She brought a tray filled with various sushi to him and said respectfully, My lord. The noble looked at it and said, It looks delicious. He turned his eyes towards her and said, I am sure it tastes even better if you feed it to me. He opened his mouth wide open. The maid knew about how perverted he was. Unfortunately, she had no other option. She picked up a piece of sushi and was about to feed him when she saw a red line appearing on his throat. Before she could think, the line split open and blood sprayed out and covered the maid's face and chest. She freaked out and screamed loudly. Immediately, a samurai appeared in the room and asked, Lord Asushi, what ink? His words were stuck in his mouth as he saw the noble he was supposed to protect lying in his chair with his throat cut open with the maid standing in shock in front of him. He got angry and muttered, Someone dared to kill a person protected by me. They are disrespecting the great name of Asayum. I will kill them. He quickly approached the maid and asked her menacingly, Did you kill him? The maid was terrified by his expression. She feared the worst. Unfortunately, there wasn't much she could do. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she said, No, I didn't do it. I was about to feed him when a red line appeared on his neck and split it open. Asayum believed her, he thought. She isn't lying. It looks like the work of a ninja, a wind user to be specific. Did he upset Suna during the negotiations? Or is someone trying to frame Suna? Chakra gathered in his eyes as he began to observe everything in the mansion. Suddenly he discovered, since when did someone with so much chakra appear in the mansion? He must be the culprit. Chakra flowed through his sword as he stabbed it into the floor. A hole appeared in the floor and he jumped on the floor below. In front of him was a butler. Asayum looked at him and said, Good disguise. If it was someone else, they'd be fooled. A frown formed on the face of the butler. He asked, What do you mean? However, instead of replying, Asayum swung his sword. A blue sword wave was shot from his sword and approached the butler. The butler immediately moved out of the way, displaying physical skills far beyond what a civilian could display. The samurai moved forward and attacked him with his sword once again. The butler took a kunai and used it to block the sword. Unlike Asayum, he didn't use chakra flow. However, since Asayum's chakra flow wasn't charged with wind nature, his kunai could hold on. However, Asayum used the opportunity to kick his chest. The butler was sent flying backwards and crashed into a wall. His transformation jutsu was dispelled. Asayum saw a ninja wearing a scorpion mask and in the amber uniform of Sunagakure. His expression became grim. It looked like he was caught in an internal struggle in the land of wind. The ninja got up and said in a cold tone, "I didn't expect you to be so good. However, you should have just looked the other way. Now I will have to kill you as well." Isayum didn't attack and asked, "Why did you kill him?" The ninja snorted. "Do you think it is so easy to take advantage of our village? Even your land of iron doesn't have the same standing as our village, let alone some no-name noble." He raised 2 fingers, wind began flowing around them. Isayum once again attacked with his sword. However, the Anbu easily dodged the sword slash. Isayum's eyes widened as 4 cuts appeared on each of his arms. 2 of them were right on his elbow and severed his blood vessels and nerves in it. Isayum suddenly felt weak and dropped his swords. The Anbu said, "In your next life, don't poke your head into other people's businesses." Wind once again began moving around his 2 fingers as he pointed them towards the samurai. Though Isayum was wearing armor, a lot of areas on his body weren't protected by it. Dozens of cuts appeared on his legs and neck. Isayum dropped to the ground and lost consciousness. He was no match for the Anbu. Having completed his job, the Anbu disappeared. After the fighting noises stopped, the servants immediately ran towards where the fighting was happening. To their horror, they noticed Isayum lying in a pool of blood. They immediately ran forward and checked on him. Surprisingly, one maid said, "He is still breathing, call for doctors. Also, inform Lord Asushi about this." Some servants left hurriedly to call for the personal doctor employed in the mansion. A couple of other servants ran to the upper floor. They were horrified to see that their Lord Asushi was dead and the maid was lying unconscious. They carried the maid down to be in the same room as Isayum. After laying her down, they went to the basement to inform the family of the noble who had hidden there immediately after hearing the sounds of a battle. The doctor soon arrived. His expression became grim after checking the samurai. He said, "His condition is very bad. Go and call for a medical ninja from the hospital. Hurry." A couple of servants nodded and left. The doctor removed Isayum's armor and clothes around the cuts. He provided first aid and stopped the bleeding. Suddenly, loud wailing was heard from the floor above. The family members of the noble were crying due to his loss. After a couple of minutes, his son walked down and saw the doctor treating Isayum, while his father was completely ignored. He shouted, "How dare you treat others when my father has died? Leave them to die along with him." His expression became cruel as he said, "In fact, all of you should join him too." Fear appeared on the face of all servants. However, the doctor was calm. He continued cleaning the wounds and said without looking at him, "Young master, he is a samurai from the land of iron. A proper explanation has to be given every time a samurai dies. If the land of iron finds out that a samurai died because you didn't allow him to be treated, you and your whole family might have to join your father. Even Lord Daimyo won't do anything to save you." His words caused the young master to be covered in sweat. He gritted his teeth and said, "I will remember this." He quickly left the room and walked back towards his father. The doctor let out a sigh. He thought, "So I have completely offended him. Oh well, if I didn't, he'd have killed me anyway. As long as I save Isayum, I will be safe." Soon all the bleeding stopped. The doctor began the blood transfusion to stabilize his condition. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "He will be fine." His words caused relief to spread among the servants in the mansion. The doctor turned his attention towards the maid and inspected her. Soon he got up and said, "She has just lost consciousness due to being terrified. She will be fine." The servants tended to both of them while waiting for the medical ninja to arrive. In around an hour, a medical ninja arrived. The doctor exchanged a few words with him and he began inspecting Isayum. He nodded his head and said, "You have done a great job." He weaved a few hand signs and extended his palms towards Isayum. A mystical Pomjutsu, Chapter 251, Framing Sunagakure. Chakra poured from the medical ninja's hands. One by one, he completely healed every cut on Isayum's body. Only some scars were left behind. Soon Isayum woke up. The memories of nearly dying returned to his mind. He sat straight and began sweating profusely due to fear. The medical ninja noticed his condition and placed his hand on his shoulder and said, "Don't worry, you're all right. Do you recall what happened?" His words snapped Isayum out of his shock. He looked down at his body and thought, "I thought I was dead for sure. The enemy was much stronger than me. I was no match." Did he assume that I was dead and left in a hurry? He turned his eyes towards the medical ninja and became scared once again. He thought, "First Asuna Anbu almost kills me and then Asuna medical ninja saves me? What the heck are these guys playing at?" The medical ninja saw the fear in Isayum's eyes and frowned. It felt as if Isayum was afraid of him. He asked, "Who injured you?" Having just gotten another chance to live, Isayum didn't wish to risk it again. He replied, I can't say as I didn't see his face. I need to make a report to Lord Daimyo. After all, he killed the noble I was assigned to protect. At the same time, a doubt appeared in his mind. The ninja who attacked me was very well versed in wind jutsus. He was a natural at it. But could it be that someone from another village was impersonating to frame Suna? I was certain that he was from Suna. The only flaw is that he left me alive. After all, it wouldn't make much sense for him to not ensure that I am dead. The only way he would profit is if he is an enemy of Suna, and the blame falls on Sunagakure entirely. He thought a lot but couldn't come up with a definite answer. He decided, leave it. I will report the event as it is to the daimyo. I will let daimyo make the decision. He was about to get up when the doctor softly said, Lord, we need your help. Isayume squinted his eyes and looked at him. The doctor informed the actions of the young master. Anger appeared in Isayume's eyes. However, he couldn't take action directly. He said loudly, anyone who wants to leave this mansion can do so along with me. I will ask Lord Daimyo to ensure that you don't suffer injustice. Smiles and relief appeared on everyone's faces. They were about to leave the mansion when another samurai appeared in front of them. Isayume noticed him and quickly bowed down. Lord Hajime. Hajime was in charge of all samurais in the Wind Capital. He was also the strongest samurai in the Wind Capital. Hajime nodded and said, I received a report that noble Asushi was assassinated. Is it true, Isayume? Isayume nodded. Yes, I am ashamed. Hajime said, I trust that you gave your all, Isayume. So give me the exact details of what happened. Isayume didn't want to speak in front of everyone. He said, Lord Hajime, can we speak in private? Hajime nodded. Both walked into one of the many rooms in the mansion. Hajime said, speak. Isayume quickly reported the details of his clash along with his analysis. He ended by saying, all evidence points towards Sunagakure. However, I still have a nagging suspicion that something else might be happening. Hajime nodded and said, good analysis. I might have sided with you if not for other events that have happened the same time you fought. Isayume furrowed his eyebrows. Hajime continued. Asushi wasn't the only noble who was targeted. 9 others were killed at the same time. In 3 cases, the culprits were able to escape undetected, including you. 7 samurais fought them. Unfortunately, 5 are already dead. Apart from you, only 1 is alive. But his condition is critical. Isayume's eyes widened. His back became covered in sweat. He muttered, I was lucky that he didn't check whether I was alive or dead. Hajime nodded. He added, everyone was injured with blades made of wind. This is a rather commonly used technique among the junins of Sunagakure. Though other villages could replicate it, sending 10 expert wind users on the same mission is quite unlikely. Regardless, Daimyo is pissed at Sunagakure. Our country might also take some actions to avenge the death of our 5 comrades. Isayume had a bitter expression. He said, everyone can see that the daimyo has been upset with them since the time they lost in the 3rd Great Ninja War. We were unfortunately the ones to be caught in between them. Hajime agreed and said, yes, but we can't take any decision regarding this. I have to meet with daimyo. You take care of your health. He was about to leave when Isayume stopped him and informed him about the actions of Osushi's son. Hajime frowned and said, leave the mansion and take everyone with you. I'll ask daimyo to take appropriate actions for them. A family that treats people like this will fall no matter how rich or influential they are. He left the mansion. Following him, Isayume and every commoner employed in the mansion left, only leaving Asushi's stunned family in the mansion. Back in the hotel, Fujin received the memories of his 10 clones. He analyzed. Everything went as planned. Now it's time to be patient. Throughout the night, samurais kept moving around the city. The security had become very tight. Many sudden inspections were being carried out. However, Fujin wasn't affected. It wasn't surprising as the number of civilians far exceeded the number of samurais and ninjas working under the Wind Daimyo. He did sense numerous chakra fields covering him. However, no one detected anything strange about him. These acts made the city quite tense. The next morning, 2 pieces of information spread through the city. The first one caused panic and restlessness among the civilian population. After all, 10 nobles were murdered in broad daylight. If nobles who were protected by samurais weren't safe, then how could common people feel safe? However, the second news made everyone feel peculiar and amused them. Rumors floated in the city that a noble's family threatened to execute all servants, so everyone serving that family quit and left the mansion. The daimyo himself had given assurances that these people wouldn't be harmed. In addition, no new worker signed up to serve that family due to the bad reputation it gained, making them a joke in the Wind Capital. As the culprit behind the assassinations, Fujin was sitting relaxed in his room. He analyzed. These 10 were all very close to Sunagakure, according to the scrolls. Now that they are dead and Suna is the first suspect, their families will stop relying on Suna. Since the land of wind and fire are allied, Konoha will become their new reliance soon, even if they don't ally with Konoha and continue the same level of interaction with Suna. It isn't actually our loss, it's just the status quo is maintained. In addition, the daimyo and remaining nobles will now be very alert against Sunagakure, though they can't pin the blame on Suna. Seeds of doubt will take root in their minds. Of course, just this isn't enough. I'll have to keep providing water to these seeds to create the required effect. Numerous plans and schemes kept running through Fujin's mind. For quite some time, the Wind Capital was fated to remain restless. Chapter 252 Sunagakure makes a move. Sunagakure. Kaza Cage Building. A ninja was hurrying inside the Kaza Cage Building. Without waiting to knock and get permission, he opened the door and said loudly, "Lord Rasa, we have an important matter." Rasa frowned. He was in a meeting. He looked at them and said, "We will continue the talks later." Everyone nodded and left the meeting. Rasa looked with annoyance and asked, "What is the rush? Didn't you know that I was in an important meeting?" The ninja replied, "I am sorry, but this is important, Lord Rasa. 10 nobles in the Wind Capital have died, 5 samurais have also died. And we are the prime suspect." Rasa frowned and asked, "What did you say?" The ninja handed him a scroll. Rasa opened and began reading. The ninja said, "It is suspected that all were killed using the Blade of Wind Jutsu, and since all 10 murders happened at the same time, they don't think any other village could have done this." Rasa's expression became grim. He thought, "Wind Daimyo's support for us has been decreasing continuously since the end of the Third War. I had just managed to stabilize our standing and was about to pull out of the alliance with Konoha. But this happened, it will push the daimyo even further away from us." His mood worsened as he cursed, "Which bastard is scheming against me? Kiri shouldn't be involved in this, so it should be either Hiruzen or Onoki, but which one?" He kept analyzing. The important matter is that 10 ninjas simultaneously used Blade of Wind Jutsu. Is one of them building a specialist unit of wind? Rasa thought for a bit and concluded, "No, Blade of Wind is a Junin level jutsu. I doubt any of them would be willing to send 10 of them here. The most likely possibility is that Wind Sword Jutsu was used. Gathering 10 users of that jutsu wouldn't be difficult for Konoha or either. Among the 2 of them, Konoha is the most suspicious. If their number of wind users increases, their destructiveness on the battlefield will go up a few notches. But for Hiruzen to do this, did he discover my attempts to break the alliance? If so, this wouldn't be his only move." Rasa's analysis was on point. Fujin's clones had all used Wind Sword Jutsu to kill or injure their targets. However, Rasa still didn't consider the point of someone using shadow clones. So he overestimated the number of attackers by a factor of 10. He looked at the ninja in front of him and said, "Call Bucky here." The ninja nodded and left. In a few minutes Bucky arrived. Rasa tossed the scroll over to him and said, "Read." Bucky nodded and began reading. His expression became grim. Rasa said, "I want you to lead a squad of 20 ninjas to the Wind Capital. Find who the culprit is and clear our name. If you can't find the culprit, then stay there and ensure that no more incidents occur. At the same time, make sure that our reputation among the nobles in the Wind Capital improves. I suspect that Konoha is behind this incident, but we can't rule out Igawatka either. They may want us to suspect Konoha and break our alliance, so be on guard against both of them." Bucky nodded. "Yes, Lord Kazakage." He immediately left and began preparations to leave. In a couple of hours, Bucky along with 19 ninjas at the rank of Chunin and above left towards the Wind Capital. Wind Capital. Fujin was still staying in the same hotel. Due to being one of the most luxurious hotels in the Wind Capital, the impact of the stricter security and frequent checks wasn't felt much there. However, a samurai still visited to ask him some standard questions before leaving without suspecting anything. Fujin didn't make any moves in these 2 days. He thought, though I could still kill some targets irrespective of how much security the samurais provide. It won't help my mission. On one hand, the daimyo will begin considering why Suna is attacking despite being the prime suspect, so their suspicion of Suna will decrease instead of increase. On the other hand, if I overdo it, daimyo and the other nobles might get terrified of Suna. They might stop increasing relations with Konoha and obediently support Suna. I am sure Rasa might just go ahead and begin killing the nobles himself as well until the daimyo capitulates, taking full opportunity of my blunder. So my best course of action is to keep striking at regular intervals. Fujin's attention was suddenly attracted. He got up and went to the balcony and looked at one of the entrances to the city. Though he wasn't actively sensing, he could feel that a group of ninjas with strong chakras were coming towards the city. He wondered, did Rasa send a few ninjas? A smile appeared on his face. He thought, good, I was getting bored. Though this mission is quite relaxing, I don't want to do it much longer. After all, I can't train at all while staying here. The longer I stay here, the more time I will be wasting. Unfortunately, this mission requires me to stay here for around 6 months, but if I can do a great job, I'll be able to leave early. Not to mention, this city doesn't deserve its name. Wind capital, my ass. I have sent dozens of clones to find and steal any wind crystals here. Unfortunately, they have none. I had planned to steal the entire treasury of it, but I never thought they won't have a single one. What a waste. Fujian sighed and eliminated that thought. He had felt enough heartache over the last week due to this matter. He turned his attention towards the Suna ninjas and waited in anticipation for them to arrive. A few minutes later, Bucky and his group entered the Wind capital. His arrival immediately gained everyone's attention. Due to the incidents and the rumors, the common people were quite afraid of them. Even the samurais and other guards were alert against them. The moods of Suna ninjas became grim on seeing how much the public perception was against them. Seeing the circumstances, they immediately traveled towards the daimyo's estate. However, the entrance of the daimyo's estate was guarded by a dozen samurais led by Hajime. Bucky greeted with a smile. Hajime-san, it's good to meet you again. I am here to deliver a message from Lord Kazekage to Lord Daimyo. Hajime replied with a smile as well. It is good to see you as well, Bucky. I would have loved to escort you in, unfortunately. Lord Daimyo is busy with important meetings due to recent events and has asked to not be disturbed. I'll have to politely ask you to wait here until he allows for visitors. Bucky and the Suna ninjas frowned. The daimyo was trying to humiliate them. Bucky said, all right, I will wait here until Lord Daimyo sends a message. The Suna ninjas following Bucky knew of the circumstances, so none spoke anything. Despite the blatant disrespect, Bucky analyzed. A power play. The daimyo intends to show his displeasure by making us wait here. The longer we are made to wait, the more he is displeased. Still, he is also disrespecting our Kazekage. Bucky looked at the ninjas behind him. They had run non-stop from Sunagakure to Wind Capital. He said, you guys can leave and have some rest. I will meet up after meeting Lord Daimyo. The ninjas nodded and left. Hajime was surprised. He analyzed. Letting the ninjas leave signifies that he isn't here to fight. However, on the other hand, it also could be seen as an insult to the daimyo, as he isn't making his subordinates wait patiently for the daimyo. Oh well, it is none of my business whether he worships or disrespects the daimyo, as long as he doesn't attack. Bucky and the rest had arrived in the Wind capital in the morning. However, despite the sun being right on top of their heads, the daimyo still hadn't called Bucky in. He kept waiting outside Daimyo's estate until the sun began setting. Finally, when the sun was about to set, a messenger came out of the estate and whispered a message to Hajime. Hajime looked at Bucky and said, Lord Daimyo is finally done with his meetings. You can meet him now, Bucky. Bucky's mood was terrible. He was made to wait outside for nearly half a day. They didn't even bother providing him with any food, water, or even a chair. He walked in thinking, what a terrible mission I accepted. Rasa-sama should have sent a diplomat along with me. A chapter 253 Rage and Sorrow. Bucky entered the Wind Daimyo's office. It was a large circular room with a circular table at the center of the room. The daimyo was sitting on the chair exactly opposite Bucky's location. Bucky bowed respectfully and said, Greetings. Lord Daimyo, Lord Kazekage wanted to send you a message. He handed a scroll to the daimyo. The daimyo didn't speak a word and took the scroll and began reading. The scroll expressed condolences on the recent deaths. It also mentioned that Rasa speculated that these attacks were done by Kanohogaka or Igawaka. Bucky said, Lord Kazekage heard about the recent assassinations and was concerned about the safety of everyone in the Wind capital. He sent me here to investigate the assassinations and increase the safety of the Wind capital. Neither Bucky nor the scroll mentioned anything about clearing Suna's name. No words were needed for that. The daimyo replied while watching Bucky carefully. The recent events have alarmed me, so I have reached a deal with the Land of Iron to send 200 more samurais here. Unfortunately, I don't have any access budget for it, so it will have to come out of the budget assigned to Sunagakure. Bucky frowned. He said, Lordunk. However, he was cut off by the Wind daimyo, who said, Save your breath. My meetings today were all about this matter. All my advisors and ministers have agreed upon it. I will send an official letter to Rasa soon. Bucky knew that speaking any more would be pointless. He turned around and said, "All right, I will start investigating the assassinations." He left without bidding any farewells. The daimyo saw him leave and let out a sigh while thinking, "These warmongers keep getting more and more power-hungry. I had advised them against starting the third great ninja war. But they completely ignored me and started it without my knowledge or permission. In the end, they lost so badly that they were forced into an alliance with Konoha. Even then, they still haven't learnt their lessons." The daimyo snorted and decided, if they want to continue being arrogant, so be it. He looked at Hajime and said, "Send that letter to me phone." Hajime nodded and left the room. After leaving, Bucky's mood was terrible. He could see that the daimyo was intent on making Suna pay for the recent assassinations. He muttered, "At this rate, Lord Rosser might decide to kill him instead of trying to come to terms with him." He met with the other 19 ninjas. Soon they began investigating the deaths. After inspecting all the dead bodies, Bucky concluded numerous clues. He analyzed. All 15 bodies have very similar injuries. Says if the same person has killed them, or at the very least all of them were probably trained by the same master. The wounds are definitely from wind blades, but the same effect could also be achieved by the wind sword jutsu, so it is likely that 10 Chunings had attacked instead of the speculated 10 Junins. This alone should be enough to get rid of most of the suspicions from us. Uncle Bucky frowned as he recalled his conversation with the wind daimyo and Hajime's attitude. He thought, unfortunately, the daimyo seems to be intent on making us pay. He won't pay any attention to this matter unless he has no other choice. In fact, even if we catch the culprits, he might still think that it is us framing someone else. Suddenly, Bucky had an idea. He realized, the only way to completely remove all suspicions would be to catch the culprits in this city and fight them openly. As long as they use wind jutsus, no one will be able to blame Suna. The only issue here is that the fighting in the city could cause a lot of damage to the city. Bucky's expression hardened as he decided, but seeing how the daimyo treated us, I don't need to be concerned about such damages. As long as the culprits are from Iwa or Konoha, the daimyo will have no choice but to readjust the budgets and closely align himself back with us. Now I just hope that those cowards haven't run away. The cowards who Bucky had referred to were sitting in one of the restaurants where he could occasionally notice the Sunagakure ninjas. Numerous thoughts were running through his mind and numerous plans were being created. Fujin heard all the talks happening in the restaurant and outside. He thought, so 20 people were sent here just for me, huh? Looks like they didn't suspect shadow clones. And their leader is Bucky. A smirk formed on Fujin's face. Still, this is making it so easier for me. I have already seen 6 faces other than Bucky. The next time, I will transform into them, ha ha ha. I wonder what Russ's thoughts would be if he received a message that the very ninjas he sent to investigate were being accused of murder. For the next couple of weeks, Bucky and his squad searched the entire Wind Capital to find the culprits. Unfortunately, they didn't find anyone. In these 2 weeks, no new incident occurred. The Wind Daimyo and Hajime became more and more certain that the assassinations were carried out by the Sunagakure. Hajime wondered, couldn't Suna come up with a better scheme? First they kill nobles and samurais here, and then they put up a charade of trying to desperately look for the culprit. Next, they will say that they haven't found any culprit, and hence will station some troops here permanently for protection. Even a child could see through this scheme. As Hajime predicted, after 2 weeks of desperately looking for the culprits, Bucky stopped. He and his unit decided to stay there to stop the next wave of attacks. Another week and a half passed by peacefully. Most of the common citizens had begun forgetting about the incident earlier and moved on with their lives. Even the Suna ninjas and the samurai had stopped maintaining full alertness. In one of the numerous mansions in the Wind Capital, a teenage girl was watering plants in her room while singing merrily. Suddenly she felt a pain in the back of her neck. Instantly, she lost consciousness and began falling down. However, a hand held her and stopped her from falling to the ground. At the same time, the door of the room opened. A middle-aged man walked in saying, "Koke, how many times should I tea? Who are you?" The man suddenly became stunned to see his daughter lying unconscious in the arms of an unknown Sona ninja. Memories of the 10 assassinations surfaced in his mind. He was about to yell when the Suna ninja suddenly appeared in front of him and grabbed his mouth and said, "Scream and both you and your daughter will die." The man felt an intense bloodlust from the ninja. Without letting the man speak, the ninja said, "Did you think that you could double-cross us by forming a secret deal with Amagakure?" The man's eyes widened. The ninja was amused as well. He thought, "I just made up a lie, to think that it would be true." The man wanted to scream that his deal with Amagakure wasn't harmful to Sunagakure in any way. On the contrary, it might benefit Sunagakure in the long term. However, he could not speak. The ninja was still grabbing his mouth so tightly that his cheeks had begun bleeding. The ninja said, "As this is just your first offense, I will only take the life of your daughter." The man's eyes widened. He began struggling, but he was no match for the ninja. The ninja continued, "If you continue to betray us or if you tell anyone about this interaction, then you and your family will be eliminated." The ninja grabbed the neck of the unconscious girl and strangled her till it popped. The man struggled helplessly, but he could only see his daughter die in front of his eyes. Tears rolled down his eyes. The ninja tossed the man away and disappeared. Rage and sorrow were visible in the man's eyes. He screamed, "Kohi!" His screams alerted the entire mansion. Immediately a samurai and a few others came running. They saw their lord sobbing with the dead body of his daughter in his arms. Her mother saw her dead daughter and began crying in disbelief and pain as well. She cried, "Who did this, Kuyero?" Kuyero's eyes reddened. He said hatefully, "Sunagakure, I will never forgive them." He looked at the samurai and said, "I want to meet Lord Daimyo, come with me, but first call a few more of your comrades to protect my family." The samurai nodded and immediately got to work. After ensuring sufficient protection, Kuyero along with a samurai began moving towards the daimyo's estate. However, he wasn't alone. 11 more nobles were also walking towards the daimyo's estate in rage and sorrow. Chapter 254, Proving Their Innocence. Fujin received all the memories and sighed. "I don't mind killing the greedy nobles. None of them have their hands clean, but killing innocent ones always leaves a bad taste." Though the training in Ambo wasn't as messed up as route training, it still was quite dark. Every new Ambo was made to kill a few innocent people on missions by the Ambo captains. Of course, their deaths would benefit Konoha in some way, but they themselves didn't harm Konoha or anyone else, hence no one would think that they deserved death. Under normal circumstances, every new Ambo would be made to do this within a month of joining the Ambo. However, since Fujin's group was much younger with ages of just 12 and 13, they were asked to do this on a mission around 6 months after joining and after they had already completed a few missions. Despite not liking it, all 3 did it. After the first time, the Ambo commander would ensure that every once in a while, the Ambo ninjas would receive a mission that would include killing innocent civilians. It would be asked of them in a very subtle manner. The method was the complete opposite of the route. Eventually, after years of serving in the Ambo ninjas would begin considering this as normal. Fujin, despite his intelligence and knowledge about the Naruto world, didn't notice this subtle scheme. But, to be fair, he wasn't the only one. Every Ambo ninja, including the likes of Kakashi and Itachi, was subtly influenced over the years. However, since Fujin's time in the Ambo wasn't very long, he wasn't influenced to an extreme end and would avoid it if he had the option. Of course, if anyone couldn't do this, they were allowed to leave the Ambo. However, the instances of someone leaving Ambo for this reason were very low. The main reason was that Hiruzen would be very careful while selecting ninjas into the Ambo ranks. This was why someone like Might Guy was never invited into the Ambo. Daimyo's estate. 12 nobles accompanied by 12 samurais arrived in Daimyo's office. All reported the assassination angrily and demanded to the Daimyo to take action against Suna ninjas and the village as well. The entire room was in complete chaos. The Wind Daimyo sighed. He wondered, what are these lunatics doing? Do they want to rebel against me, or is it really someone else who is pushing the blame on them? The Wind Daimyo was confused. At the same time, he was a bit fearful. After all, even though he held the authority in terms of power, he was no match for the Kazekage. If the Kazekage decided to kill him, it wouldn't matter how many samurais he hired to protect himself. However, he shook his head and concluded, "No, if Russo attacks me, then he will have to face retaliation from the other daimyos. Though their kaijas don't have to listen to them, they will, as they could all plunder Sunagakure together and divide the benefits among themselves. The only fear is if 3 or more kaij decided to revolt against their daimyo. In that case, we will be history. However, the other cages haven't shown any such indications yet, so Russo would not dare to make a move against me yet." Though he didn't want to take action, he couldn't let the grievances of the 12 nobles go unanswered. He instructed, "Call Bucky and the other Sunagakure ninjas. Hajime, increase the defenses of the estate." Hajime nodded and said, "It will be done, Lord Daimyo." He immediately got to work. Soon, over 50 samurais arrived at the daimyo's mansion and took positions. Hajime stayed by the Wind Daimyo's side. Bucky received the message. He frowned and wondered, "What now? Does the daimyo have any problems with us staying here?" He gathered all his subordinates and went towards the daimyo's estate. Fujin was sitting in a restaurant near daimyo's estate using Hiroshi's appearance. He noticed the 20 Suna ninjas running towards the estate. He wondered, will they be imprisoned, or will Bucky manage to convince the daimyo? I want to watch their meeting. It'll be fun for sure. Bucky and the rest entered the estate. A frown formed on Bucky's face. The remaining Suna ninjas also became alert. They could see that the number of samurais in the mansion had increased a lot. They walked to daimyo's office. As soon as they did, the eyes of the nobles widened. Koyero pointed at one ninja and screamed it was him. This bastard killed my daughter. I want him dead. The other 11 nobles also screamed at the same time while pointing towards other ninjas. The room became complete chaos once again and was drowned in their screams. The Sunagakure ninjas were dumbfounded at the accusations. Bucky had a bad feeling. The daimyo commanded, quiet down. Soon the entire room became quiet. However, the nobles kept looking at the Sunagakure ninjas with hateful gazes. If looks could have killed, then all Sunagakure ninjas would have already been dead. Daimyo said, how would you explain this, Bucky? Bucky replied, I have no idea what you or they are talking about, Lord Daimyo. The daimyo frowned. He analyzed. From his expression, it looks like he really doesn't know anything. The faces of others are clueless as well. But do they really not know anything or are just acting? He said, do you really not know? 12 of your subordinates assassinated family members of these nobles, and you say you have no idea? Has the Kazekage decided to break all ties with me? Bucky's bad feelings increased. He quickly replied, that's impossible. Why will we kill them? He looked at the nobles and identified a few. He added, some of them have a good relationship with our village. We have no reason to destroy our ties with them. Koyero screamed, you found out about my trade deals with Amigakure. You killed my daughter to make me stop doing that, despite that trade deal having no adverse impact on Sunagakure. Another noble screamed, bastard, I don't even have any trade deals with any other country. Still this lunatic falsely accused me and killed my wife. The Suna ninjas immediately defended themselves and said that they didn't kill anyone. Soon, a verbal argument broke out. However, Bucky was silent. He was sweating as he realized. Don't tell me. The previous attackers kept hiding in the city until we dropped our guard down. In the meantime, they must have seen us and decided to disguise themselves as us to kill their next target. Additionally, there were 2 more attackers this time. The previous time, we were only suspected due to the use of the wind jutsu. However, this time, their suspicion will be entirely on us. Due to the rage of losing a loved one, they won't even listen to any explanations. Bucky stopped his subordinates and said, Lord Daimyo, you know that ninjas are able to transform into others. I believe that the culprits of the previous assassinations disguised as us so that our relations will deteriorate further. Koyero snorted, sure they can transform. But can they replicate their voice as well? Even if they can, how can they replicate his voice so perfectly? Even if someone transformed, it will have to be someone from your group. Bucky was stunned. He muttered to himself. Don't tell me that we interrogated all the culprits and still didn't notice them. How else could they replicate our voice? However, Bucky shook his head and said, we have been very active in the Wind Capital recently. It isn't surprising that they could have overheard us. Koyero's anger kept soaring. He said, good. So what you mean to say is that you are so incompetent that not only could you find the previous culprits, but instead you allowed them to completely disguise themselves as you, and you call yourself a ninja. This insult angered many of the Sunagakure ninjas. They immediately argued back and said how competent and capable they were. Kojiro replied while pointing at a ninja, if that's the case, then my daughter was murdered by none other than him. The Sunagakure ninjas were left speechless. Though they were much stronger in strength, when it came to debating, they were no match for the nobles who spent all their time scheming for benefits. After all, not every ninja could scheme or argue as well as a Kage could. Bucky stepped in once again and said loudly, this is a pointless argument. I can assure you that none of my ninjas were involved. He looked at the nobles and said, one by one, point out the ninjas you saw in your mansions, and at what time. I will ask them where they were at that time, and we will verify. That will prove that my men are innocent. Before the nobles could say anything, the daimyo nodded. All right, let's do that. The nobles complained, but the daimyo said, we will first have to know the truth. Your loved ones won't rest in peace if the real murderers roam free while we punish the ones who didn't. Chapter 255, Forcing the Kazekage out of Sunagakure. Since the daimyo had made his decision, the nobles quieted down. Soon, the 12 ninjas whom Fujin impersonated were being questioned. They all stated where and with whom they were and what they were doing. The samurais began verifying all the information and cross-checking it with people who could vouch that they were indeed in those locations. 11 ninjas were around other people, and hence they had multiple alibis. However, one ninja was hiding and doing an undercover task. Hence no one noticed him during that time. So despite telling his location, he had no alibi. The locations of the remaining 8 ninjas were also asked, as the nobles mentioned that they could have transformed, even among them, except one. All had good alibis. The Suna ninjas left no stone unturned in order to clear their name. All proof indicated that the Suna ninjas were innocent and were framed. The nobles went quiet. Though 2 ninjas didn't have any alibi, the rest had them, so they weren't sure anymore. However, they didn't want to give up. After all, their loved ones were killed in front of their eyes. If they assumed that someone else was the culprit, then they would never get justice. After all, the killers of the previous incident were still roaming free, no matter how much the families of the dead nobles cried and created a ruckus. They didn't get the justice they deserved. Suddenly, one noble recalled something. He quickly said, "Can't ninjas use clones? What if they stayed there while their clones did their dirty work for them? After all, we can't put up a fight against clones either." Bucky and the Suna ninjas were put under pressure once again. Bucky said, "According to what you described, the ninjas who attacked you had solid bodies. We use wind clones who don't have solid bodies and are easy to be dispelled. If your killers were clones, then they would be shadow clones of Kunokoguka or rock clones of Igawaka. None of us know how to do those clones." Hajime raised his eyebrows. He could counter Bucky's point, but he didn't, as he recalled the scroll he received. "Lord Mifune asked me not to take sides in this matter as long as no one is fighting. Though I don't like how Suna is behaving, I should let it go as it is only my business." In order to pacify the Land of Iron, Rasa had reached a deal privately with them and compensated them appropriately, despite not having committed the crime. As a result, Bucky was saved from being pushed further into the corner by Hajime. One of the nobles asked, "How can you prove that you can't create those types of clones?" Bucky was annoyed. He asked, "How can you prove that we do?" The noble didn't back off and replied, "You can't prove that you can't create those types of clones. And 2 of your ninjas were still missing at the moment of the murders. Perhaps these 2 are the only ones who can create those types of clones and hence were missing. So you guys still are the most suspicious ones." Bucky showed an annoyed expression. He argued, "Do you think a ninja can create clones at will? Do you even know how much chakra is needed to create one?" Despite showing an irritated expression, Bucky was relieved. He thought, "Good, from certainty, they have backed off to just suspicions." They entered another debate which lasted 15 minutes. Finally, the daimyo said, "Enough, you have made your point, Bucky, but you Suna ninjas are still the most suspicious ones. For the time being, I will be placing the 12 ninjas they saw and the missing ninja under arrest. As for the rest, you will be accompanied by samurais at all times." Bucky's expression became ugly. He said, "Lord Daimyo Yukundung." However, the daimyo interrupted him and said, "Calm down. They will only be placed under house arrest, and all 13 ninjas will stay together, so you don't need to worry about them being treated unfairly. If you want, you can visit them daily. I'll send a letter to Rasa and ask him to come here before this matter explodes beyond the point where we can resolve it." Bucky analyzed for a few seconds and agreed to those terms. He gave some instructions to the 13 ninjas and left the estate with the remaining 6 Suna ninjas. The remaining 13 Suna ninjas were placed in a large room with samurais watching over them. Fujin noticed the 7 ninjas leaving and began analyzing. Only 7 left the estate, meaning that 13 are still in the estate. "But I only impersonated 12 of them. After all, I heard only their voices and have no idea how the rest sounded. Did someone else also try the same tactic coincidentally? What exactly happened inside?" Fujin kept analyzing but couldn't be certain. He concluded, "Since only 7 came out, I am sure that they won't let go scot-free. But since they seem fine, no conflict should have taken place," meaning that Bucky and the daimyo came to some agreement. "Looks like I will have to wait for information to be released or for rumors to spread." Fujin got up and began leaving. He sighed and muttered to himself, "Why is everyone so smart? It'd have been so easy if they accepted the events as presented to them and just suspected Sunagakure blindly. I could have returned to Konoha by now if they did so, and their troubles would also end." Fujin returned to his hotel room and waited patiently. He knew that the next few days would be very tense in the Wind capital. The Wind daimyo soon sent a message to the Kaiser Cage, informing him about the recent events and asking him to come to the Wind capital city. At the same time, Bucky also sent a message to Rasa informing him of everything that happened in detail. Sunagakure, unlike Fujin who was calmly bidding for time, Rasa was absolutely livid. Rasa crushed the scroll in his hand and cursed angrily, "What the hell? Who does he think he is?" However, his advisors quickly said, "Please calm yourself, Lord Kazekage. We are not in any position to make any move against Lord Daimyo. If something were to happen to him, all other villagers would attack us like vultures." Rasa calmed down and snorted. "I will go and make a visit. You two come with me. Also bring our best senses along." The advisors nodded. They began gathering the forces and preparing to leave. Rasa was disappointed in Bucky. He wondered, what the hell is Bucky doing? How could he allow things to deteriorate so much under his watch? Are the enemies so good that he is completely helpless? Not knowing the answers, Rasa left Sunagakure along with 2 advisors, 2 censors and 4 Ambu ninjas. At the same time, 10 squads of Ambu left Sunagakure and began following Rasa's group from a distance. In total, 46 ninjas headed towards the Wind Capital city. Wind Capital. Back in Wind Capital, rumors had begun flying around the city. These were being spread by the 12 nobles who were affected. Once again, the entire city began gossiping. Fujin heard a bunch of rumors as well. However, unlike a normal citizen, he noticed a bunch of inconsistencies. He analyzed. The rumors say that Daimyo has decided to punish the evil Suna ninjas, but I doubt that would be the case. Otherwise, Bucky wouldn't have withdrawn peacefully. I guess the rumors are being spread by those nobles so that the Daimyo is forced into taking action. But why has the Daimyo not made any statement? It's almost as if the Daimyo wants these rumors to be known all through the city. Unlike Fujin, who was analyzing calmly, Bucky and his subordinates were panicking. Bucky too arrived at the same conclusion as Fujin. However, he had more information than Fujin. He realized the Daimyo isn't crushing these rumors as he wants a public perception to be built against Sunagakure. This way, when Lord Rasa arrives, he will be under a lot of pressure. However, despite noticing Daimyo's scheme, Bucky couldn't do anything. After all, he was being watched by samurais at all times. The rumors would continue spreading unrestricted. At the same time, they would be exaggerated to ridiculous extents. However, after some time, all the rumors would be silenced by one piece of news: the 4th Kazekage had arrived at the Wind Capital city. Chapter 256. Trouble comes. Irrespective of the rumors and politics, the Kazekage was still the leader of Sunagakure. He was one of the 5 people who stood at the top of the ninja world. As such, he was looked at with awe and reverence throughout the Land of Wind. Immediately, people flocked over to the place the Kazekage was walking through. Most threw the rumors to the back of their minds. However, a few became alert. If the rumors were true, then it could mean trouble. After all, the Kazekage himself had to come to the Wind Capital city to clear up the matter. Rasa continued walking through the streets slowly. He was followed by 2 advisors and 2 censors. The Ambo had stopped outside the city. As soon as the news of his arrival spread, people began rushing towards him. At first, only a few people were on the side of the street. However, in a few minutes, both sides of the streets were jam-packed. Rasa looked at the people surrounding the streets with a smile. He could have hurried through to the Daimyo's estate. However, he didn't, as this was a good opportunity to show that he had public support and make the Daimyo think twice about alienating him any further. Among the numerous people watching him was Fujin. Unlike his previously relaxed state of mind, he was very tense. He thought, shit, why the fuck did he show up? Granted, I created a mess, but that shouldn't have been enough to call a cage here, right? Fujin wasn't concerned when Bucky arrived as he was confident of escaping, even if Bucky somehow discovered him. However, if Rasa was to find him, Fujin didn't have much confidence in his ability to run away. The resultant fight was sure to give away his identity as well. However, despite being tense, Fujin wasn't panicking as he knew he won't go around looking for the culprits. That would be unbecoming of a Kaj. I just have to avoid making any moves while he is in the city. His expression hardened as he decided, of course, once he leaves, I will create a mess and leave the city for good. In the Wind Capital, Fujin wasn't the only one who was on alert. There were 4 more people whose expressions were ugly. One of them cursed, "Which bastard is acting so brazenly? How can I do my promotion mission when the Kazekage is in the city? Shit, I should have left when the samurais and the Suna ninjas had come down." A few Konoha Ambo were in this city as well for the promotion mission. However, they all had to stop acting after Fujin killed 10 nobles. Most of them had escaped the city in the week before Fujin made his second move. Only 4 had decided to continue their mission in this city. However, Fujin's actions endangered all of them. Just like Fujin, they decided to maintain a low profile as well. Along with Kanoha Anbu, there were dozens of other spies and undercover ninjas operating in the Land of Wind from every other village. They too cursed the bastard who operated in such a high-profile manner. Rasa continued his journey towards the daimyo's estate. Bucky had met up with him mid-route and informed him about the rumors. Rasa maintained a smile on his face. However, his mood was gloomy. He was extremely upset with the daimyo, under everyone's gaze. He entered the daimyo's estate. Fujin sighed. I really need an inside man. How am I supposed to act when I have no idea what deal is taking place between them? Of course, Fujin could try to have his clones infiltrate the estate, but it would be very risky. If alerted, the daimyo would know that someone other than Rasa is active in the Wind capital city. That would be counterproductive for Fujin and would cause his previous efforts to go to waste. Fujin entered a restaurant and waited for Rasa to leave the estate. However, he didn't expect to gain much. Although he is younger and probably much more foolish, he is still a cage like that old fox. I doubt I'd see anything from his expression. But since there are so many people here, one additional guy staring at him shouldn't alarm him. I might as well wait and see. Inside Daimyo's office, Rasa and the Wind daimyo entered an intense debate. Rasa was upset at how the daimyo had consistently cut his budget and placed his ninjas under house arrest. Meanwhile, the daimyo was upset at the blatant killings of his nobles. After a couple of hours of intense discussion, both finally reached a consensus. The daimyo said, "All right, for the next 12 months, I won't lower your budget any further. However, you will have to ensure the safety of the nobles in the Wind capital." Rasa noticed an opportunity and immediately said, "All right, you can issue missions for protection in Sunagakure. I will reserve up to 1,000 ninjas who will be ready to move out on notice." Unlike Konoha, which was suffering from a shortage of manpower, Suna had plenty of spare manpower, though their total number of ninjas was far lesser than Konoha. The number of missions they received was very less compared to Konoha. So many ninjas didn't have any work to do. Rasa wanted to use this opportunity to alleviate some of that problem. However, the daimyo shook his head and said, "No, that won't work. You will have to deploy the ninjas by yourself to ensure their safety. You won't receive any payments for this." Rasa frowned. He said, "How can that work? How will I even be able to afford that?" The daimyo replied, "Your budget has sufficient funds to be diverted here. Besides, most people in this city think that Sunagakure was behind the recent wave of murders. The nobles all think that you were behind the murders as well, so how can they even be willing to hire Sunagakure ninjas for protection? You will have to deploy ninjas in this city without any missions and ensure the safety of all the nobles. In time, they will forget about this event and their trust in Sunagakure will increase. If you don't, then don't expect a single mission from the Wind City, and if any more nobles or their families die and you other suspect, then they will put pressure on me to reduce your budget." Rasa's frown kept deepening. He wasn't sure how to respond. After all, both options were bad for Sunagakure. One of the old advisors sitting next to him said, "Lord Daimyo, just like you, we also have to answer to public pressure. I understand your point of view, but please also understand our troubles. How about we find a common ground, and you pay us an annual fee to deploy our ninjas in the Wind City permanently?" The daimyo thought for a bit and nodded. After haggling for a bit, the old advisor managed to get 5 million ryo per month from the daimyo. However, Rasa wasn't happy. The amount was in no way even comparable to the amount of money that Sunagakure would have received if the nobles had issued missions. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. He nodded and said, "All right. However, I have another condition. If there are no more incidents, then I want you to increase this amount next year by a huge amount." The daimyo nodded and said, "That is fair. We will renegotiate the terms next year." The two talked for a bit before leaving. The 13 ninjas that were kept under house arrest were allowed to leave with the Kazekage. However, instead of returning to Suna, Rasa stayed in the city. He looked at 2 sensors and commanded, "Roam around the city in disguises. Check if there are any spies or troublemakers, and eliminate them." They nodded and left. The news that the Kazekage has decided to stay in the city spread like wildfire. Every spy in the city, no matter from which village they were, immediately went into hiding. They employed every means they had to suppress their chakra levels to civilian levels and stayed hidden within the houses. Fujin stayed in his hotel as well. He had no intention to try his luck against Rasa. However, he began analyzing. "I made a cage move. Will this make my mission a success?" After all, a mere tune-in forced a cage to make a move. Fujin thought for a bit and realized, no, there are two ways to see this. If I was being tested on my ability to make an impact, then this feat would be a very good one. However, my mission is to create a divide between the Wind Daimyo and the Kaisercage. If this meeting results in their differences being resolved, then my mission would be a failure. Fujin sighed and muttered, what a mess. He decided, no more undercover missions for me. Though playing the game of chess is fun, I'd much rather just kill all my targets and return to training. Now that I think about it, it's been almost 2 months since I used the elemental training rooms. Hiruzen for sure would suspect that I was the one who kept draining the wind crystals. Well, it's not like he can complain. Even if he discovers, he will stay quiet so that I don't begin using them openly and without any restraints. The 2 censors Rasa brought with him kept roaming in the city for 3 days. Fujin felt chakra fields sensing him several times. In these 3 days, the 2 censors found 13 spies and undercover agents. However, they were all from smaller villages. No one from the other major villages was caught by them. The Sonogakure ninjas quickly made a move on them and neutralized them one by one. Their fights caused some property damage to the city. Unfortunately, none of them were wind users, so Sonogakure couldn't pin the blame on them. After 3 days, the 2 censors met Rasa and said, apologies, Lord Kaisercage. We couldn't sense the culprits who did the assassinations. Rasa replied, it's fine. If they didn't have the confidence to hide, they wouldn't have done something so outrageous in the first place. Anyways, begin preparations to leave. You and Bucky will stay back here. I'll send some Ambu to coordinate with you in secret. At that instant, a group of 12 ninjas approached the city. The samurais guarding the city were already on full alert due to the recent events. They immediately noticed them. The group wasn't aware of the recent events in the city and approached the guards. Hayashi Ryota put one hand on the hilt of his sword and said loudly, halt, state your name and purpose. The ninjas immediately stopped. One of them said, I am Oda Seiji. I come from Kuroga no Senson mercenary group. Round a couple of months ago, a squad of our mercenaries was hired to escort a trading group to this city. But since then we haven't heard anything from them, so we came here to investigate. Chapter 257 Rasa's Gaze. The mercenary group from which the real Hiroshi had hired protection had arrived in the wind capital city to investigate the reason why their comrades didn't return for almost 2 months. Ryota had handled several such cases in the past. In the majority of cases, this was a result of those squads being killed in action. He replied, I see. Can you tell me the names of the ninjas and the traders? Seiji nodded and informed him of the names of his ninjas. He added, they were tasked to guard a mercenary group led by Takahashi Hiroshi. Ryota nodded and passed the details to a few civilians who used to sit with them. After a while, one person said, Ryota-sama, the ninja names they mentioned haven't arrived here. Seiji heard it and let out a sigh. He had expected this result. Suddenly, another person said, Takahashi Hiroshi and his trader group had arrived in this city 51 days ago. You were the one who accepted them, Ryota-sama. The mercenary group were surprised to hear this information. Ryota took the document and read it. He said, yeah, I have some memories. This group was very polite. Seiji squinted his eyes and asked, but if our members are missing, how can they have arrived here unharmed? Ryota shrugged and replied, how would I know? Seiji said, we want to meet with Hiroshi and question him. However, Ryota shook his head and said, unfortunately, I can't allow that. Once a trader or a merchant arrives in the city, he is our guest. We cannot allow him to be harassed. Seiji frowned. He withdrew a bag and handed it to Ryota secretly and asked, can we meet up with him now? Ryota took a quick look inside the bag. It had around 100,000 ryo. He smiled and said, sure, how can I deny our esteemed guests? The mercenaries maintained their smile but scoffed internally at his morals. Meanwhile, the other samurais and civilians guarding the gate were joyous. After all, they too would receive a share. Ryota sent a samurai to find and bring Hiroshi to the gate. An hour later, a samurai knocked on the door. Fujin was surprised. He wondered, are they still finding the culprits? He opened the door and politely greeted, hello, how may I help you? The samurai looked at him and said, Hayashi Ryota, the samurai who you met while entering the city wants to meet you. Please come with me. Fujin frowned. He didn't understand what it was about. He asked, why didn't he come here? The samurai said, he is busy and can't leave the city gates. That's why he sent me. As for the reason, you will have to ask him. He began walking. Fujin followed while thinking, what the hell is this about? Did they figure out that I was the culprit? Though that doesn't make sense. A lot more people would show up if they did. Hell, Rasa might come himself. Fortunately, the samurai wasn't walking in the direction of where Rasa was staying. Though suspicious, Fujin followed, thinking, it doesn't matter what he is planning. As long as Rasa isn't involved, I'll be able to get away. They arrived at the city gates. Ryota looked at Hiroshi and warmly said, we meet again, Hiroshi. Did you enjoy the city? Fujin nodded and said, yes, I have fallen in love with the city. I can't seem to want to leave it. Haha, but why did you call me? Ryota pointed at a group of ninjas who were walking towards them and said, these are from the mercenary group Kurogun no Sensen. They want to ask you about the ninjas who took the mission of protecting you. Ryota looked at Fujin meaningfully. After all, there were no ninjas protecting his group, and he hadn't mentioned them when they arrived. Fujin was surprised. He thought, I see, they have finally come to investigate. Such bad timing. If they had arrived after Rasa left, I would have had so many more options. Looks like this identity can't be used anymore, though it is probably not a bad thing to leave the city now. Rasa and Daimyo should have come to some sort of a deal, so if I make a move now, the Daimyo will lean more towards believing that someone is setting him up. Seiji approached Fujin and said sternly, Hiroshi, I am Oda Seiji from Kurogun no Sensen. Can tell me why your group arrived in the city without the squad assigned to protect you? Unlike Ryota, Seiji was much more aggressive. Fujin walked back a couple of steps and showed a fearful expression. Ryota took a step in between them to remind Seiji that this was the Wind capital city. Seiji stopped but still stared at Fujin. Fujin answered with a hint of fear in his voice. On our route we encountered an injured man. He said that his group was attacked by bandits and asked for our help. The ninjas we hired initially refused the injured man, but the man promised to give them all his profits from the goods that he was going to trade. That made them change their mind. 2 of the ninjas followed the man, while the remaining 2 escorted us to the city. However, since we didn't hear from those 2 ninjas again, the other 2 got worried. So after the city was in sight, they left us and went back to look for them. I don't know what happened after that. Seiji frowned. He analyzed. Seeing how scared he is, I doubt he is lying. Besides, we are a mercenary organization. People chasing after more money is very common in our line of work. Did they fall into a trap? And why did the remaining 2 chase after them? No, something doesn't add up. He asked, where did you find that man? Fujin replied, round 4 days' journey from here. Seiji replied, okay, you will come with us and take us to that place and help us find them. Fujin immediately said no, the man was in a very bad state. I don't want to end up like him. Seiji replied, you won't. We will be there with you. However, Fujin kept saying no. When Seiji was about to get aggressive, Fujin said, this is the Wind capital. You can't forcefully take me from here. Seiji frowned and looked at Ryota, who looked to be on Fujin's side. He said, help me out. Brother, I will make sure that he is safe and that you are compensated. Fujin immediately wondered, compensated? Ryota nodded and looked at Fujin and said, Hiroshi, you don't need to be worried. With 12 ninjas, even I won't be able to do anything to them. So the bandits won't pose a threat to you. In addition, you need to save the ninjas who brought you here safely, or at the very least, you should get justice for them. Seeing that everyone was against him, Fujin's face became very ugly. He reluctantly nodded. All right, the samurais and the mercenaries smiled. After all, Hiroshi was just an ordinary trader. How could he disobey them? Seiji secretly passed another 100,000 ryo to Ryota. Fujin obviously noticed it and decided, in the future, if I decide to steal or plunder, I will definitely start with the land of iron. In terms of cash flow, that will definitely be the richest country in this world. This wasn't the first time Fujin had seen an honorable samurai act in this manner. Almost every samurai working for daimyo or in capital cities was very liberal when it came to accepting bribes. In addition, the daimyos also paid them a lot for the protection they provided. In addition, they were also the largest suppliers of basic ninja tools and chakra metal weapons, and also mined the last few remaining elemental crystal mines. So a lot of money keeps getting funneled continuously into the land of iron. They were about to leave when suddenly a commotion was heard. The entire group looked back to see the Kazakage walking towards the city gate, along with a few Sunagakure ninjas. Everyone immediately became tense. They quickly moved out of the way and stood on one side of the road respectfully. Rasa passed through the gate without paying any attention to them. The mercenary group sighed in relief. However, Rasa suddenly stopped and glanced towards the mercenary group and thought, weird, why do I get a peculiar feeling from this group? Rasa didn't sense anything from this group. However, he just felt as if something about them was off. Chapter 258. Unknowingly throwing the opportunist to the center of the battle, one of Rasa's advisors asked, "What's the matter, Lord Kazakage?" Rasa turned around and continued walking. He asked, "Who were those people?" Though his voice wasn't soft, Fujin and the mercenaries didn't hear it due to the distance between them. The advisor answered, "They are wearing the headband of the mercenary group Kurogun no Sensen. It is the group that is active in the countries between us and Earth." "Is there any issue with them?" Rasa replied, "It's just a feeling. Send 3 Ambu groups to chase after them. I have a feeling that we will find something important by trailing them." The advisor nodded. The mercenary group had become very tense and nervous when Rasa glanced at them. Even Fujin was the same. He didn't have any desire whatsoever to face Rasa, especially when they were surrounded by deserts. When Rasa turned around and continued walking, the mercenaries finally began breathing again. Fujin also became visibly relaxed. He decided, "All right, no more mess in the city. Though unlikely, if this is his clone and his main body is hiding inside the city, I will be in deep trouble." After Rasa left their line of sight, the mercenary group immediately left the Wind Capital. One of them carried Fujin on his back so that they would be able to move faster. For once, Fujin didn't object. After Rasa's group moved a sufficient distance from the city, 40 Amber ninjas appeared in front of them. Rasa immediately assigned tasks to them. 3 squads of Ambu chased after the Kurogon no Sensen mercenaries. 4 squads were tasked to sneak into the Wind Capital and keep an eye on the city from the shadows. They would coordinate with Bucky to catch all undercover enemy ninjas in the city. The last 3 squads would keep an eye on the surroundings of the Wind Capital and keep track of the people traveling in and out of the city. Rasa and the advisors immediately began traveling back to Sunagakure. The mercenary group continued without knowing that they were being followed. Since Fujin couldn't activate his chakra field, even he was unaware. Fujin acted like he was helpless and obediently guided them towards the location. After traveling for nearly half a day, the group arrived at the spot where Fujin had killed their members. Fujin said, "This is the spot where we met that man. He was sitting here and was covered in blood." Seiji looked at Fujin. Fujin looked very tired and sleepy. The mercenaries didn't find it odd as it was late at night and they had traveled for 12 hours straight. Seiji asked, "Are you completely sure?" Fujin looked nervous and said, "I am confident. However, this is a never-ending desert. Everything looks the same, so I can't be 100% sure." Seiji looked sinisterly and said, "You better hope that we find them. Otherwise, you will have hell to pay. Even your family won't be spared." Fujin's face became nervous and said, "I am sure that we met that man around here." Seiji looked around and said, "Everyone, investigate the nearby area. See if you can find any tracks." Everyone nodded and began looking. The group had a couple of sensors. They spread their chakra fields and began investigating. For a couple of minutes they didn't find anything. Fujin observed them. The nervousness on his face faded away. He decided, "It's time." He was about to flicker when the eyes of one of the sensors widened. He shouted at the top of his lungs, "Everyone, gather together." Fujin hadn't used his chakra yet. He was surprised and stopped his plans. Immediately, all 12 ninjas gathered next to each other. Seiji asked, "What did you sense?" The sensor said loudly, "We have been led into an ambush." Seiji and others looked at Fujin and stared at him. Fujin was dumbfounded. He thought, "The one who is supposed to ambush you is me. Who else is here? Did those 4 I killed become zombies?" Seiji grabbed Fujin's collar and cursed, "Hiroshi, you dare lead us into an ambush?" Fujin became alert. He could have killed Seiji, but he was on guard against who their sensor had sensed. He said, "I have no idea about any ambush." At the same time, he raised his guard to the max. If Seiji or anyone else would have any thoughts of killing him, he would retaliate. Before Seiji could retort or take action, 12 amber ninjas of Sunagakure appeared in front of them. One of them said, "I wonder what Kuraga no Senso ninjas are searching for in the Land of Wind." He took a look at Fujin and added, "That too with a civilian leading you." Seiji replied, "Our squad that was assigned to protect them went missing. We are investigating them." The Ambu ninja said, "Nice story. I will have to ask you to surrender without a struggle, otherwise it won't end well for you." A glint appeared in Fujin's eyes. He thought, "Good, these 2 can fight each other. No one will waste their time on a civilian. Once one of them wins, I will kill the survivors." However, suddenly his eyes widened. Seiji grabbed Fujin with more force and said, "Interrogate this civilian. You can verify our story from him." He lifted Fujin and threw him at the Suna Ambo ninjas. Fujin shouted in panic, "Wait, don't do this, bastard, you promised my safety." However, he was still sent flying towards the Ambo. He cursed, "Shit, I wanted to take advantage of their fight and kill them all. But he pushed me to the center of it." The lead Ambu smirked behind his mask and grabbed a kunai. He swiped it at Fujin while keeping his eyes on the mercenaries and saying, "Do you think that you can get away by using a civilian as a unk?" Suddenly one of the Ambu ninjas shouted. "Be careful." Fujin was just 1 meter away from the Ambu, who was swinging a kunai at him, when he opened his mouth and exhaled extremely sharp winds on the unsuspecting Suna ninjas. The attention of the Suna ninjas was on the mercenaries. The attack caught them off guard. The lead Ambu ninja was hit head-on. The wind slashed through his neck and beheaded him. Both his detached head and body had several deep cuts from which blood sprayed out like fountains. 9 more ninjas suffered a similar fate. They fell with their eyes wide open, not expecting to die so suddenly on a simple mission. Only the Ambu who shouted and the Ambu next to him jumped backwards in time to dodge the attack. Fujin noticed them in the air and flickered, appearing behind them in the blink of an eye. Both grabbed their kunai and turned around to face him. The mercenary group was dumbfounded. They had examined Fujin before leaving and hadn't found anything suspicious about him. They saw Fujin open his mouth and shot multiple air bullets. The last 2 Suna Ambu had their bodies riddled with holes. Both fell down dead like the rest of their comrades. Having killed all the Suna ninjas, Fujin turned his gaze towards the mercenaries. In an instant, everyone grabbed their weapons and watched Fujin with grim expressions. The Suna group who they were afraid of was slaughtered with ease by the trader they forcefully brought along with them. Seiji asked, "Who are you, and why did you hire one of our squads if you are so strong?" Seiji obviously realized that the person in front of him was in disguise. However, he wasn't if he had disguised as Hiroshi all along, or if he had replaced Hiroshi later. He decided to act oblivious to leave an escape for himself. Fujin realized it and thought, "Good attitude. Unfortunately, you shouldn't have taken the initiative to bring me out of the city." Without a word, Fujin disappeared. Their censor immediately shouted. On our right, everyone turned their heads, only to see a gigantic wind dragon heading towards them. They immediately dispersed. The dragon tackled the spot they were standing at and exploded, causing winds to spread through the area. The winds immediately sent the sand flying in the air. Not only did it lower the visibility in the area, the sand would enter the eyes of anyone who would keep them open. Unlike Fujin who could sense, their group had just one sensor. Without the ability to see and knowing how strong and treacherous their enemy was immediately caused panic to spread. In the dust cover, Fujin flickered behind the mercenary who had shouted his position. The mercenary turned around and shouted, "He is here." He immediately jumped backwards while keeping a kunai in front of him defensively. However, Fujin just took a step forward and swung his sword at the mercenary. The mercenary tried defending, but the sword cut straight through his kunai and split him into 2. Without the sensor, the remaining mercenaries were left blind in the desert. Fujin killed them all with extreme ease in just a couple of minutes. Chapter 259, Solving a Mystery. The winds died down, and the sand settled back in the desert slowly. The blood was automatically buried under the sand. Fujin had already stored all 24 dead bodies in scrolls. He also collected the scroll containing the dead bodies of the 4 ninjas who were protecting Hiroshi's trading group. He analyzed. With 12 mercenaries and the same number of Suna Ambu missing, the deserts will soon become very chaotic. Returning to Wind Capital will be pointless and very risky. I should eliminate a few targets who are outside the city quickly and return to Konoha. Having made his decision, Fujin began moving towards his targets. 10 minutes after Fujin left, a squad of Sunagakure ninjas arrived where the fighting had taken place. One of the Chunings said, "It doesn't look like anyone was here, Captain Yura." Yura frowned and said, "It looked like there was a huge battle here. It should have just ended. Inspect the area, we may find some clues." Since Yura was the team leader, everyone obediently followed his instructions. For half an hour, they didn't find anything. Suddenly, one of the ninjas shouted, "Everyone come here." Immediately, everyone approached him. He had dug the sand a few meters and was standing in a hole. As soon as they reached him, everyone's face became solemn. The sand was dyed red in blood, and it wasn't just a little bit either. One of the ninjas commented, "So much blood-soaked sand, how many people were killed here?" The spot they were standing on was where Fujin had killed 10 of the 12 Ambu ninjas from Suna. Though he had collected their bodies, the blood had seeped into the desert. Fujin didn't bother getting rid of it, as it would require a lot of effort and time without providing him with any benefits. Yura said, "It looks like someone killed a bunch of people here. They didn't bother cleaning up all the evidence thinking that no one would find it there. Unfortunately, they didn't think that we would sense their battle and come investigate so quickly, unknown to the Suna ninjas." It was their good luck that the killer didn't waste time clearing all the evidence, otherwise, they would have run into Fujin and joined their comrades on the trip to the afterlife. One of Yura's teammates countered, but who would be so brazen in our country? I think it might be the work of someone from our village. That is why they weren't concerned about others finding out. Yura nodded and said, could be. Regardless, collect as much of this blood-soaked sand as you can. Others will keep scouting this area. If it was an intense battle, then everyone wouldn't die in the same place. We will carry the blood samples to Suna. If it was done by someone else, then it will help the village a lot. His team immediately got to work. They spent over half a day searching the entire area and managed to collect blood samples of all 24 ninjas who were killed. Of course, they didn't know that and kept searching for hours, despite finding all the blood samples. Finally, at noon the next day, they stopped searching and continued their journey to Sunagakure. At the same time, Fujin was running across the desert. He let out a sigh and muttered, this country is too damn big. Though the Land of Wind didn't have many resources, in terms of land area, it was the largest country in the ninja world. The deserts went on for thousands of kilometers to the west. Due to this, the country was incredibly difficult to be invaded. It was one of the factors why Konoha didn't push into the Land of Wind, despite inflicting grave damage on Suna in every major war. The large size of the country meant that there were some cities in the west that were very far from the Land of Fire, due to their geographical location. They had no choice but to be completely subservient to Sunagakure. Konoha and the other villages had zero influence in this area, so Shikaku wanted to weaken Suna's influence by targeting cities and towns in this area. Yura's squad traveled a few hours through the desert towards Sunagakure when they encountered another squad. Yura noticed them and immediately stopped and greeted respectfully Elder Manobu. Elder Manobu was in his 50s and a member of the Sunagakure Council. He had an illustrious career and made many contributions during the Second and Third Great Ninja Wars. So Yura was very respectful. Manobu didn't bother making any small talk and asked, Yura, you're coming from the Land of Bird, right? Did you see any Ambu or mercenaries on your way here? Yura shook his head and said, no, but the place we passed through had a huge battle. We probably missed it by less than 15 minutes. We didn't see anyone there, but a lot of blood was spilled there. We estimated that at least 18 people were gravely injured. Manobu frowned. He had been dispatched by Rasa after they lost communication with that group of Ambu. He analyzed. Kaiser Kage-sama said that he sent 3 squads of Ambu to chase them, and the mercenary group had 12 ninjas and 1 civilian. 18 grave injuries could mean that one of the 2 forces was wiped out. Suddenly, he had a very bad feeling. He muttered to himself, if our Ambu won, they would have returned or at least sent a message. Does that mean that they lost to merely mercenaries? But how could our Ambu lose to mercenaries? And how did they avoid Yura's group? Did they escape into the desert instead of continuing their journey? Manobu asked Yura, did you spot any tracks leaving the battlefield? Yura shook his head. Manobu frowned and asked for the blood samples. He took it from Yura and handed it to one of his subordinates and said, carry this back to Sunagakure and have them inspect the blood. Also, ask Lord Kazekage to prepare multiple units. We may need to scout the entire desert. Yura, you and your squad led us to the spot where you noticed the combat. Yura replied, but we have to hand over the mission report. Manobu instructed, pass it to him. This could be an emergency. I might need all the help that I can get. Yura nodded and said, all right, Elder. He handed another scroll to him and they began their journey back. Yura's squad had already consumed soldier pills, so they could continue running. The group returned to the spot where Yura had collected the blood-soaked sand. They investigated a lot but didn't find anything substantial. Round the same time, Rasa received Manobu's message. He immediately reached the same conclusion as Manobu, and frowned. He muttered, first the issue with the daimyo, and now 12 Ambu went missing. What is happening in my country? He immediately got to work and began arranging more squads to reinforce Manobu while analyzing. Looks like my suspicion on the mercenary group was right, but that group didn't look strong enough to take on my Ambu. Was someone hiding their strength? Or did I underestimate the goals of the group creating a mess in the Wind capital city? Or Rasa overcalculated as he didn't have a clue about Fujin. His Ambu died just because they were unlucky enough to encounter him. Since they had no success, Manobu's group began moving towards the Wind capital city to investigate the reason for the appearance of the mercenary group. At the same time, they wanted to investigate the civilian with them. After another half a day, they finally arrived in the Wind capital city. Manobu quickly moved towards the city gate where they were spotted and found Ryota, despite not being under Sunagakure. Ryota greeted the elder warmly. Manobu directly asked, "Tell us about the mercenaries from Kuroga no Sensun with whom you were talking a few days ago." Ryota was surprised by the question. He said, "They came here over 2 days ago when the Kazekage left the city. They were investigating their 4-man squad that went missing while escorting a trader group. Their circumstances were quite weird as the trader group made it to the city without any harm, but all the 4 ninjas were missing." Manobu frowned and said, "The trader group is very suspicious." Ryota nodded and informed him about the remaining details. He ended by saying, the trader Hiroshi was worried about their safety, so he volunteered to go with them to tell them where they saw the man. Ryota lied with a straight face, instead of saying that he was forced. He said that Hiroshi volunteered. However, this lie helped Manobu as he became even more suspicious of Hiroshi. He said, "Give me the details of where Hiroshi stayed. Also, gather the remaining 11 traders and have them meet me." Ryota was about to say no as Manobu had no right to order him around. However, Manobu added, "I have a suspicion that this group might have something to do with the recent murders in the city." Ryota became serious and immediately nodded. He asked his subordinates and informed them about the hotel where Hiroshi stayed. As for others, he would need some time. Manobu nodded and began moving towards the hotel. He muttered, 12 traders, 12 assassins, 12 mercenaries. I think we are finally getting some clues." Chapter 260 Culprits Found. As they were walking, Yura asked Elder, "What assassinations took place in the Wind capital city?" Yura and his groups weren't in the land of Wind when Fujin was creating a mess, so they were unaware. Manobu's subordinates filled them up. Yura and his subordinates began sweating, having realized how much trouble their village was in. After hearing the circumstances, they couldn't help but suspect that their own village was behind the assassinations. They understood how others would have felt. The group reached the hotel where Fujin had stayed and entered his room. The room was impeccably clean. They began investigating the room. After half an hour, every single one had an ugly face. One of Yura's subordinates said, "There is nothing here that could point us to him at all. It's as if no one has lived here for months." Another said, "But the hotel staff said that he lived here for over 7 weeks. A third ninja commented, "Maybe the hotel does such a good job cleaning that all evidence is wiped out." However, one of Manobu's subordinates shook his head and said no matter how well they clean, their scent gets left behind, but there is no scent in these rooms. This guy is not a civilian for sure, he should be a well-trained Ambu ninja from some country. Everyone agreed with his analysis. Yura added, "If he is, then the other traders should be as well, and they didn't leave the city. We can catch them and clear our village's name." Manobu nodded and said, "Bucky is leading our ninjas in this city. Let's meet up with him. He must have an appropriate plan for when we catch the culprits." Everyone nodded and left. When Bucky received the news, he was elated. He had been under a lot of stress for the last few weeks. No matter how much he worked, he never found any clue. The entire job was a dead end. Since Manobu cracked the case, he immediately deployed his ninjas in the city to find the remaining 11 traders. Unfortunately for Bucky, even this clue was a dead end. They searched non-stop for 2 days. However, no matter how much they looked, they didn't even catch a whiff of those 11 traders. It was as if they had long disappeared from the city. No one even remembered their faces. Only a few merchants who earned big profits from their trade recalled them. But they hadn't seen them again for almost 2 months, so their memories were useless for Suna ninjas. Bucky sighed and muttered, "I should have known that it wouldn't be this easy." Manobu nodded and said, "They probably changed their disguises after entering the city." He looked in the direction of the city gate and added, "Fortunately, we can soon be able to inspect every citizen in this city." Manobu's words confused the Suna ninjas other than Bucky. Bucky and Manobu moved towards the city walls and jumped on top of it. The other Suna ninjas followed them. As soon as they saw the sight outside, their eyes widened. Most were too stunned to speak. Finally, one muttered, "This is insane." Outside the walls were numerous figures running towards the city gates. A total of 334 ninjas were sent by Rasa to keep the Wind City safe in accordance with his deal with the Wind Daimyo. Yura asked in surprise, "Did Lord Kazekage send these many ninjas to help us search the deserts?" Bucky replied, "No, they will be stationed in the Wind capital to prevent such incidents in the future. It was a deal between Lord Kazekage and the Daimyo to settle our differences." Seeing that these were their reinforcements, the Suna ninjas were elated. Excitement coursed through their bodies. With such numbers, finding spies would become extremely easy. Sunagakure ninjas received a warm welcome. Bucky immediately made arrangements for everyone. After settling them, Bucky immediately began acting on his plan. He cooperated with the city guards to get records of every citizen officially living in the city. He informed the ninjas of their task. He planned to inspect each and every person in the city. He wanted to find any person living in the city who was unregistered. That could help him find the 11 traders who were under different disguises. At the same time, he planned to deploy sensors throughout the city, though spies could disguise themselves as civilians. Completely hiding from sensors inside the city would be much more difficult, especially since there were a few extremely capable sensors with him. Unfortunately, before Bucky could begin his search, another Suna ninja arrived in the Wind capital and rushed straight to Bucky and handed him a scroll. Bucky opened and read it. His eyes widened, and his expression became very grim. Manobu was surprised. He asked, "What does the scroll say?" Bucky handed him the scroll. Manobu read it and immediately became angry. He cursed loudly. Which heinous bastard did this? The Suna ninjas became curious. However, the messenger said, "Elder Manobu, Lord Kazekage has asked you to travel to Sabakuchui's. Yura will assist you. In addition, 5 squads of Ambo and 30 squads of varying strengths have moved out of our village and are currently heading towards Sabakuchui's." Manobu nodded. He and Yura along with their squads left immediately. Another scroll with a similar message reached the hands of the daimyo. He too became solemn. Soon, the news spread throughout the city, causing panic to spread. Daimyo did his best to quell the panic. His assurances calmed the citizens of the Wind City and brought stability back to the city. 12 hours ago, Fujin traveled for over 3 days through the desert to finally reach the city called Sabakuchui's. He let out a sigh and muttered, "The distance between this city and Sunagaku is larger than the distance between Konoha and Sunagaku." Though Fujin took a few breaks, he wasn't a fan of traveling for so long through non-stop desert. He couldn't help but wonder, in these 3 days, I encountered 2 sandstorms. They didn't affect me due to my expertise in wind release, but I can't help but wonder how civilians even trade across these huge and treacherous deserts. Fujin began inspecting the defenses of the city from the outside, while recalling the information about the city mentioned in the scrolls provided by Shikaku. Sabakuchui's was a mid-sized city in the far west of the Land of the Wind, though it wasn't the largest city. It was one of the most important cities for one critical reason. The city was surrounded by numerous facies and received a decent amount of rainfall every year. Due to this, it had the highest agricultural production in the entire Land of Wind. Overall, around 60% of the total agricultural production in the Land of Wind would be obtained from this city. Due to this, it provided food to all the cities and villages in this region, thus saving the Land of Wind a lot of trouble to transport food across the vast desert. In addition, it also sent some food supplies to the Wind capital and Sunagaku and helped them reduce dependence on other countries for food. For this reason, Sunagaku permanently deployed 8 squads to protect this city. In addition, 1 elite Junin would always be deployed in the city. Fujin observed the defenses and analyzed, although the city is important, the defenses aren't very high. The reason for this is that Sunagaku doesn't expect anyone to hit them so far away. In addition, the samurais won't protect this place because of how far into the desert it is. Still, the city does have an elite Junin. Killing him would be troublesome, especially if there are Junons to reinforce him, unless I can take him by surprise like those Ambo. Fujin analyzed and shook his head. No, that would be difficult. If I fight him and fail to kill him, then he will gain a lot of my information. It would be troublesome if they get enough information to calculate later on that it was me. I shouldn't use my summons or vacuum techniques in my fight unless I am sure that I can kill all who see me use them. The same for my famous swords. Probably best if I avoid using my swords completely. The city had 2 entrances and was surrounded by huge walls. Each entrance had 2 ninjas watching over it. The walls did have seals inscribed in them, but they weren't as complicated as the Wind capital city walls. Fujin planned, I could enter the city through the gates by using disguises of one of the people who leave the city to work in the fields. However, if they follow a certain routine, then entering at odd times will raise suspicions. Fujin thought for a bit and decided. Leave it, it's late at night. They won't leave the city for hours. I'll try to infiltrate directly. If I fail or am detected, I'll just escape and replace one of the citizens working outside. Fujin began working on the seals. He was a bit excited as he had never yet attempted to dismantle the seals of an entire city. The most fun he had with seals was messing with Hiruzen in the Wind training rooms in the Ambu training facilities.